Get that woman off my plane. Now! The command echoed through the cabin, cold and final. Flight attendant Megan Wilson's voice cracked like a whip as security guards rushed toward row 14A. The black woman in the window seat wasn't shouting. She wasn't resisting. She was simply stating calmly and repeatedly, "This is my assigned seat. I have my boarding pass." But in less than 24 hours, this woman, Dr. Vanessa Hamilton, would not only cost global aerodynamics $5 billion, but methodically dismantle the entire company from the boardroom down. What started as a routine flight would end as one of the most expensive mistakes in aviation history. The crew saw only a woman in casual clothes who didn't belong in premium seating. They never imagined she controlled the financial lifeline that would determine their company's entire future. The air in Terminal 4 of JFK was thick with the smell of stale coffee and collective anxiety from 100 delayed flights, Doctor. Vanessa Hamilton leaned her head against a support pillar, the rough paint a stark contrast to the plush leather of the boardroom she had just left. She was exhausted, not just tired, but bone-weary down to the marrow. For the last 72 hours, she had been locked in negotiations, a marathon of spreadsheets, legal jargon, and high-stakes posturing. As the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Equity Group, she was the architect of a $5 billion deal, a complex, leveraged buyout of a smaller, innovative airline, AirTech Innovation, which would then be merged with legacy carrier Global Air Dynamics. This deal wasn't just big, it was transformative. It would save GAD from its slow decline and create the largest, most advanced airline in North America. And it was finally done. The ink was dry. All she wanted now was to get home. She'd given her private jet crew the week off, expecting negotiations to last through the weekend. This sudden resolution left her flying commercial. She'd booked the last seat available, a premium economy window seat 14A on GAD Flight 881 to Los Angeles. She didn't look like a woman who commanded a $90 billion equity fund. She wore black joggers, a simple gray hoodie from MIT, and designer sneakers built for comfort, not show. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, elegant bun. In the financial world, Vanessa Hamilton was known as the calculator, precise, unemotional, and devastatingly effective. She'd risen from Chicago's South Side, earned her MBA and PhD in economics from MIT, and built Pinnacle from scratch into one of the most powerful investment firms on Wall Street. But today she was just a tired traveler wanting to get home. Anonymity was a luxury she usually enjoyed. Today it would become a liability. When she'd left Johannesburg at 19 to attend college in America, her grandmother had told her, "Remember, no matter what door you walk through, you bring your ancestors with you." That wisdom had guided her through boardrooms where she was often the only black woman present. It had steadied her when rivals underestimated her, when partners tried to sideline her, when success itself became a target on her back. What no one understood about Vanessa was that she didn't just build businesses, she transformed institutions. She didn't make deals, she reimagined industries. And she did it all without raising her voice, without grand displays of power. Her strength was in her quiet certainty, her meticulous planning, and her absolute refusal to be diminished. Today, all of that power rested quietly behind tired eyes as she waited to board her flight home. The gate area was a mess. Flight 881 was delayed by 2 hours due to a late-arriving crew. The tension was palpable among the waiting passengers. Children whined. Business travelers checked watches. Everyone looked miserable. A gate agent, a man in his late 50s with a sour expression and a name tag reading Richard Parker, was getting visibly frustrated as he made announcements that no one wanted to hear. "We will board by groups. Do not crowd the podium." He snapped into the microphone, voice tight with irritation. When they finally called her group, Vanessa shuffled forward, backpack slung over one shoulder. As she reached the podium, Richard snatched her boarding pass. He looked at the pass, then at her, then back at the pass. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're in the premium cabin?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Yes, 14A. Vanessa said, her voice tired but polite. Richard squinted at her, his gaze traveling from her hoodie to her joggers to her sneakers. "Funny you don't look like a premium passenger." The words didn't come out as a whisper or an aside. They came out loud enough for those nearby to hear. Vanessa froze. The microaggression was so blatant, so unnecessary, it took her breath away. She could have eviscerated him. She could have shown him the executive platinum card sitting in her wallet. She could have told him about the $5 billion deal she'd just orchestrated that would save his employer from bankruptcy. She could have asked for his manager. But she was so tired. "I just want to go home," she said, her voice flat. "May I have my pass back?" Richard grunted and handed it back deliberately, brushing her fingers with his. "Whatever. Have a nice flight." As she walked down the jet bridge, she felt a burning sensation in her chest. It was the familiar sting of casual everyday racism. It didn't matter that she'd been on the cover of Forbes last month. It didn't matter that her signature was worth $5 billion to the very company this man worked for. To him, she was just a black woman in a hoodie who didn't look like she belonged. An older white couple behind her whispered not quietly enough, "They'll let anyone in premium these days." The woman nodded in agreement, probably using points from some credit card promotion. Vanessa kept walking. This wasn't her first encounter with prejudice, and it wouldn't be her last. Usually she let these moments slide off her back. Today, though, something stuck. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the culmination of too many similar moments over too many years. Or maybe it was the irony that she was about to save this airline from financial ruin, and they couldn't even treat her with basic courtesy. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her assistant. "Flight delayed. Boarding now. We'll update ETA when we land." Her assistant Jennifer's response came immediately. "Documents ready for signature tomorrow. Board wants final briefing. Safe travels." Vanessa put her phone in airplane mode and continued down the jet bridge, mentally reviewing the merger terms as a way to distract herself from the interaction. The deal would save thousands of jobs. It would modernize an aging fleet. It would create an airline worthy of the future. At least that had been the plan 10 minutes ago. Vanessa stepped onto the aircraft and was greeted by a flight attendant who looked as stressed as the gate agent. Her name tag read Megan Wilson. Megan gave Vanessa a plastic smile that didn't reach her eyes, pointed vaguely toward the back, and then turned to her colleague to complain about the catering. The boarding process was chaotic. Passengers argued over overhead bin space. Flight attendants made half-hearted contradictory announcements. Vanessa navigated the crowded aisle to row 14, her assigned premium economy section. She found 14A slid into the window seat, grateful to be out of the terminal. She stowed her backpack, pulled out a financial report, and closed her eyes, trying to find a moment of peace. The deal was done. The hard part was over, or so she thought. "Excuse me, you're in my seat." Vanessa opened her eyes. A man was standing in the aisle, glaring down at her. He was in his early 50s, wearing a rumpled suit and reeking of duty-free cologne. His face was flushed with irritation. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said, sitting up straighter. "My seat 14A. You're in it." "Get up," he said, not as a request, but as a command. Vanessa, accustomed to de-escalating tense boardrooms, pulled out her boarding pass. "I'm in 14A, she said calmly. "Perhaps you're 14C. I am 14A. The man snapped, his face reddening further. He waved his own boarding pass, but not close enough for her to read it. "Now move. I'm sure we can sort this out," Vanessa said, her voice level. "My pass says 14A. Could you please check yours again?" The man. "Let's call him Andrew." Donovan puffed up. "Are you calling me stupid?" "I know my own seat." He looked around, seeking alliance. "Flight attendant!" he bellowed, waving his arm. Megan bustled over her face, a mask of annoyance. What is the problem here? This woman is in my seat, Andrew declared, pointing an accusatory finger at Vanessa. And she's refusing to move. Megan didn't even look at Vanessa. She looked at Andrew, then at the empty aisle seat 14B and the other empty window seat 14C. She turned her exasperation on the one person she felt she could. Ma'am, you're holding up the entire plane. You need to move. Vanessa held up her boarding pass. My name is Vanessa Hamilton. My seat is 14A. Here is my pass. Could you please check this gentleman's pass? Megan snatched the pass from her hand. She glanced at it, then at Andrew. Sir, can I see your pass? Andrew flashed his pass. Megan squinted at it. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but it was replaced by hardened resolve. She had already chosen her side. Sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescending tone. It seems your pass has you in 14C. This gentleman is in 14A. Vanessa's blood ran cold. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lie. No, Vanessa said, her voice losing its tiredness and gaining a steel edge. That is incorrect. My pass says 14A. I am not moving. Please get your purser or the gate agent to scan both passes. Megan's eyes narrowed. The polite, tired woman in the hoodie was gone, and in her place was someone giving orders. Megan didn't like that. Sweetie, I am not going to argue with you. Megan said, her voice rising. You are causing a disturbance. You either move to 14C or you will be removed from this flight. The other passengers were watching now. Phones were emerging, though not yet recording. People were muttering. Just move, someone, whispered from behind. I am in the seat assigned to me. Vanessa stated, her voice low and dangerous. I am a paying passenger, and you are making a false claim. I will not be moved based on your error. Andrew piled on. She's being aggressive. I don't feel safe. She threatened me. Megan seized on it. That's it. You've threatened another passenger. You are a safety risk. She turned and spoke into her intercom phone. I need the purser at row 14. I have a non-compliant passenger. Lead flight attendant Sophia Garcia arrived within minutes, her expression already set. Megan pulled her aside, whispering urgently. Vanessa could catch snippets. Refusing to move threatened a passenger becoming aggressive. Sophia approached, clipboard in hand. Ma'am, I understand there's a seating issue. There is no issue, Vanessa said firmly. I was assigned seat 14A. This gentleman is claiming it's his seat. Instead of verifying our boarding passes electronically, your colleague made a visual determination and decided I should move. She's getting hostile, Megan interjected. I don't feel safe. From across the aisle, a young woman spoke up. She's not being hostile. She's just asking you to check her seat assignment properly. The woman, Lydia Rodriguez, had been watching the entire interaction. I can see her boarding pass from here. It says 14A. Sophia turned to Lydia. Ma'am, please don't involve yourself in security matters. Security matters? Lydia echoed, incredulous. This is a seating misunderstanding. Sophia's expression hardened. Ma'am, I need you to stay out of this or we'll have to address your behavior as well. Lydia pulled out her phone. I'm going to record this. Something's not right here. Megan stepped toward her. Recording is against airline policy during active security events. I'll need to confiscate that phone. A male flight attendant appeared in the aisle. What's the situation? We have 2 disruptive passengers, Megan said, pointing to both Vanessa and Lydia. One refusing to follow crew instructions and another recording against policy. The situation was spiraling out of control. Passengers were whispering. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed to be enjoying the drama. Andrew stood in the aisle, arms crossed, a smug expression on his face. I need to speak to the captain. Vanessa said, her voice calm but firm. This is discrimination and false reporting. The captain is busy preparing for departure, Sophia snapped. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Move to 14C or you will be removed from the aircraft. From somewhere behind her, Vanessa heard a male voice. Just check the damn boarding passes. How hard is that? Sophia's head whipped around. Who said that? No one answered. The tension in the cabin was palpable now. Please call the head purser, Vanessa requested again. I want both boarding passes scanned to verify seat assignments. That won't be necessary, came a new voice. The head purser, Daniel Thompson, had arrived. His expression was grim, his posture rigid. What's the situation? He asked Sophia, not bothering to address Vanessa. Passenger refusing seat reassignment and becoming disruptive, Sophia reported, affecting departure time and creating anxiety among other passengers. Daniel didn't even glance at Vanessa's boarding pass. Ma'am, you need to follow crew instructions immediately. This is a federal requirement. I am following proper procedure, Vanessa countered. My boarding pass assigns me to 14A. I am requesting electronic verification of seat assignments, which is my right as a passenger. Daniel's face darkened. Ma'am, are you refusing a direct instruction from this crew? I'm refusing to be displaced from my assigned seat without verification, Vanessa clarified. That's it, Daniel declared. Captain needs to be informed. As Daniel moved toward the cockpit, Lydia spoke again. This is wrong. I'm recording this. Megan lunged for Lydia's phone. That's not allowed. A scuffle ensued as Lydia pulled her phone away. Other passengers began recording, now sensing something significant was unfolding. Vanessa remained in her seat, outwardly calm but inwardly seething. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about dignity, about being seen, about not being casually erased. She'd faced these battles her entire career, but never expected it on a plane where all she wanted was to go home and sleep. The minutes ticked by. The cabin grew warmer. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some began complaining about the delay. Others directed angry glances at Vanessa, blaming her for holding up the flight. Then Captain James Foster appeared, his presence commanding immediate attention. His cap was tucked under one arm, his expression severe. What's the problem here? He asked, directing the question to Daniel. Passenger refusing crew instructions, sir. Disrupting departure and causing passenger discomfort. She won't move from 14A to 14C even though her boarding pass is for 14C, Megan added. That is a lie, Vanessa stated firmly. My boarding pass clearly shows 14A. No one has electronically verified either boarding pass. The captain barely glanced at her. Ma'am, on this aircraft, the crew's word is final. If they say you're in 14C, you're in 14C. That's not how assigned seating works, Vanessa replied. Please scan both passes and see for yourself. I don't need to scan anything, Captain Foster said dismissively. This disruption ends now. Either move to 14C or I'll have you removed from my aircraft. Your aircraft? Vanessa raised an eyebrow. I believe Global Air Dynamics owns this aircraft, and I have a right to sit in my assigned seat without harassment. A dangerous silence fell over the cabin. The captain's face flushed. That's it. Call security, he ordered. This passenger is interfering with crew duties and delaying departure. Security arrived with alarming speed. 2 officers, Michael Rodriguez and Troy Davis, entered the cabin with purpose. Captain Foster briefed them quickly, painting Vanessa as unruly and non-compliant. She's refusing crew instructions and delaying departure, he explained. We need her removed. Officer Rodriguez approached Vanessa first. Ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. Vanessa hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. Officer, I'm being removed from this flight because I refuse to give up my correctly assigned seat 14A. My boarding pass verifies this, but the crew has refused to scan it. This is discriminatory treatment. Ma'am, that's not for me to decide. Right now, you need to comply with crew instructions. I understand you're doing your job, Vanessa said, her voice steady. but I want it on record that I'm being removed despite having valid documentation for this exact seat. I want your badge numbers and a report filed." The officers exchanged glances. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Vanessa looked at the faces around her. Megan's smug satisfaction, Daniel's rigid authority, Andrew's entitled smirk, and the uncomfortable expressions of passengers witnessing the scene. Some had phones discreetly recording. Others looked away, unwilling to see the injustice unfolding. She made her decision. With deliberate dignity, she gathered her report, tucked it into her backpack, and stood. "I will comply with your request to leave," she said, clearly loud enough for those recording to capture. "But I want everyone here to understand what's happening. I am being removed because I refuse to surrender my correctly assigned seat to a white male passenger without verification. I have not raised my voice. I have not been disruptive. I have simply asked for fair treatment." "Ma'am, save it for customer service," Officer Davis muttered. As they escorted her toward the exit, Vanessa locked eyes with Andrew, who now sat triumphantly in seat 14A, her seat. "This seat costs $400, she said calmly. "Your airline will cost $5 billion. Andrew scoffed. Megan rolled her eyes. Captain Foster turned away, already mentally composing the incident report that would justify this removal. As Vanessa walked the long aisle of shame, she held her head high. Dignity couldn't be taken. It could only be surrendered. And she would surrender nothing today. At the aircraft door, Lydia called out, "I have it all on video." "This wasn't right." Daniel pointed at her. "You're next if you don't silence that phone." Vanessa stepped off the plane, flanked by security, aware that this moment would change everything for her, for global air dynamics, and for an industry that had operated too long without accountability. The jet bridge felt endless. Each step took her further from humiliation and closer to resolution. By the time they reached the terminal, her mind was clear, her purpose set. This wasn't just about one incident on one flight. This was about power, about respect, about consequences. They led her to a small security office where a supervisor waited. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a practiced, neutral expression, asked for her side of the story. "I was removed from Flight 8881 for refusing to give up my assigned seat 14A without verification. The crew falsely claimed my pass was for 14C but refused to electronically scan either boarding pass to confirm." "Were you disruptive?" the supervisor asked. "No, I did not raise my voice. I did not use inappropriate language. I simply refused to be moved without verification." "And why do you think this happened?" The question hung in the air, its subtext clear. Vanessa met his gaze. "Because when they looked at me, they didn't see Dr. Vanessa Hamilton, CEO of Pinnacle Equity Group. They saw a black woman in a hoodie who didn't fit their image of someone who belongs in premium seating." The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. "I'll need to file a report. Please do. Include my full statement, and I'd like to make a phone call." He hesitated, then pushed the desk phone toward her. One call. Vanessa dialed Jennifer's number from memory. Her assistant answered on the first ring. "Jennifer, initiate Protocol Omega. All merger activity frozen immediately. Full team meeting in 3 hours. And contact our media relations department. Things are about to get complicated." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Understood. Protocol Omega confirmed." "Is everything okay?" "No," Vanessa replied. "But it will be. I'll explain later." She hung up and turned to the supervisor. "I believe you have no grounds to detain me further. Am I free to go?" The supervisor nodded suddenly, looking nervous. The name Pinnacle Equity Group had registered, and the implications were beginning to dawn on him. Vanessa stood, straightened her hoodie, and picked up her backpack. "I suggest you preserve all security footage from gates and the aircraft. Your company will need it." With that, she walked out, already strategizing her next move. By the time Flight 881 reached cruising altitude, the first phase of her response was already in motion. Global Air Dynamics had just made a $5 billion mistake, and they didn't even know it yet. The airport security office buzzed with tense energy. Officer Rodriguez had taken over the questioning while Davis stood by the door, arms crossed. The initial bravado of the aircraft removal had faded, replaced by an uncertain bureaucratic caution. "Dr. Hamilton, we need a statement about what happened on the aircraft." Rodriguez said, his tone more respectful now that he'd seen her ID and realized who she was. "I've already explained the situation," Vanessa replied calmly. "I was seated in my assigned seat, 14A. Another passenger claimed it was his seat. The crew refused to verify either boarding pass electronically and insisted I move. When I refused to give up my correct seat assignment without verification, I was labeled disruptive and removed. The crew claims you threatened another passenger. That is false. There are multiple witnesses and recordings that will confirm I remained calm throughout. The only threat I posed was to their authority when I insisted on proper verification." Officer Davis shifted uncomfortably. "The airline has the right to remove any passenger they deem problematic." "Yes, but not the right to discriminate," Vanessa replied. "What happened on that plane wasn't about airline policy. It was about bias assumptions and a crew unwilling to admit they were wrong." Airport Director Howard Williams entered the room, his face a mask of professional concern. He'd clearly been briefed on who Vanessa was. "Dr. Hamilton, I want to personally apologize for this experience," he began. "We take these matters very seriously." "Do you?" Vanessa's voice remained even. "Because what I experienced today happens to passengers of color constantly. The difference is that most don't have the resources or platform to fight back." The director paled slightly. "We'd like to offer you accommodation and rebooking on any flight of your choice. I appreciate the gesture, but that won't be necessary. I'll make my own arrangements." Vanessa gathered her belongings. "Am I being charged with anything?" The three men exchanged glances. "No charges?" The director confirmed. This was clearly a misunderstanding. Not a misunderstanding, Vanessa corrected. A series of deliberate choices that led to discrimination. "There's a difference." She stood. "I'll be requesting all security footage recordings and crew statements through official channels. Please ensure nothing is deleted or altered." "Of course," the director stammered. "We fully cooperate with all legitimate investigations." As Vanessa prepared to leave, Officer Rodriguez spoke up. "Dr. Hamilton, for what it's worth, I'm sorry about how this played out. It didn't sit right with me from the start." Vanessa paused at the door. "Then next time, Officer Rodriguez, say something. The world doesn't change from silence." She walked out of the security office phone, already in hand, scrolling through messages from her team. Protocol Omega was in full effect, all GAD merger activities, frozen legal team activated media strategy being developed. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of an airline that had just treated their financial savior like an unwelcome intruder. As she exited the terminal, Vanessa noticed passengers from Flight 881 being deplaned. Technical issues, they were told. The flight would be delayed several more hours. She caught Andrew's eye as he trudged back into the terminal. He didn't recognize her out of context, just another face in the crowd. She smiled slightly. He had no idea what his entitlement had just cost him and 30,000 other GAD employees. In the back of a taxi headed to Manhattan, Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. She thought of her grandmother's words again. "You bring your ancestors with you." Today she carried their dignity, their resilience, their refusal to be diminished. And tomorrow she would show an entire industry the cost of forgetting that simple truth. The Plaza Hotel suite offered a stark contrast to the cramped airline seat that had started this chain of events. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Central Park's sprawling expanse, the city lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Vanessa stood at the window phone pressed to her ear, delivering precise instructions to her team. "I want all GAD merger documents pulled, every contract, every negotiation point, every contingency clause." She paused, listening. "Yes, Jennifer, absolutely. And make sure legal understands this isn't a negotiating tactic. We're walking away completely." She ended the call and set her phone down, finally allowing herself a moment alone with her thoughts. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a familiar heaviness, the weight of yet another encounter where her humanity had been deemed less important than someone else's convenience. Vanessa kicked off her sneakers and sank into the plush sofa, running her hands over her face. This wasn't her first experience with discrimination, not by far. But something about this one cut deeper. Perhaps because it came at the end of her most significant professional achievement. Perhaps because it was so brazen, so unnecessary. Or perhaps because just for once she was in a position to do more than simply absorb the impact and move on. Her mind drifted back to her first major financing deal 15 years ago. She'd secured a $50 million investment for a tech startup, outmaneuvering several established firms. When she arrived at the celebration dinner, the maitre d' had directed her to the service entrance, assuming she was kitchen staff. When she explained she was hosting the dinner, his disbelief had been painful to witness. That night, she'd smiled through the humiliation. She'd reassured the embarrassed maitre d' that it was a simple misunderstanding. She'd charmed her clients and secured the deal. And later, alone in her apartment, she'd cried tears of frustration. Today was different. Today, she didn't have to smile through the humiliation. Today, she had options. Vanessa walked to the minibar, poured herself a sparkling water, and returned to the window. Below, New York continued its restless rhythm, oblivious to the corporate earthquake she was about to trigger. Global Air Dynamics was a legacy carrier, an American institution with over 30,000 employees. By morning, its stock would be in free fall. By the end of the week, its board would be in crisis. Within a month, its very survival would be in question. All because they couldn't be bothered to verify a seat assignment. But this wasn't about vengeance. Vanessa had built her career on strategic decisions, not emotional reactions. What had happened today wasn't just a personal affront, it was a business liability. A company that allowed bias to override protocol, that empowered employees to discriminate without accountability, that created a culture where customer dignity was optional rather than essential. That company was fundamentally broken. She thought about the thousands of GAD employees who would be affected. Most had nothing to do with what happened today. Most were probably decent people doing their best. But institutions didn't change through individual goodwill. They changed through structural upheaval, through consequences that couldn't be ignored, through the painful recognition that the status quo was unsustainable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan Hayes. Her CFO board emergency meeting confirmed for 8 a.m. Media already sniffing around. Fox Business called for comment on GAD incident. Vanessa texted back. No comment at this time. Full strategy session tonight. Some companies deserve to fail. She set the phone down and made her decision. This wasn't just about finding another way to save GAD. This was about transformation of an airline, an industry, and maybe in some small way the world in which she lived. By the time she picked up the phone to call her executive team, her path was clear. Global Air Dynamics had just lost its lifeline. But perhaps from its inevitable collapse, something better could emerge. The door to true change was now open, and Vanessa Hamilton was about to walk through it. The private conference room at Pinnacle's New York office hummed with tension. It was 9 p.m., but Vanessa's core team had assembled within 2 hours of her call. On one wall, multiple screens displayed news feeds, social media monitoring, and financial data. On another, the complete GAD merger documentation was projected, key clauses highlighted in urgent red. Vanessa sat at the head of the table, still in her traveling clothes, her calm demeanor at odds with the gravity of what she was about to propose. Chief of Staff Thomas Wilson entered last tablet in hand, his usual composed expression replaced with barely contained anger. "I've got the initial reports. Videos are already circulating on social media. 3 different passenger recordings all showing the same thing. The airline's statement is..." He paused, jaw clenching, dismissive at best. "Let me guess," Vanessa said. "They regret the misunderstanding and are looking into the matter." "Worse," Thomas replied. "They've claimed you were verbally abusive to crew members and refused to comply with safety instructions. They're painting this as a security incident, not discrimination." Legal counsel. Sofia Mendez shook her head in disbelief. "They're doubling down, with multiple videos contradicting their story. That's legally indefensible. They assume most corporations handle these things the same way," Vanessa replied. "Issue denials wait for the news cycle to move on, perhaps make a small settlement later if necessary. They don't expect real consequences." CFO Nathan Hayes cleared his throat, the voice of financial pragmatism in a room charged with emotion. "Vanessa, while I understand your personal feelings about what happened today, we need to consider the business implications of walking away from GAD. This is a $5 billion deal that's taken 18 months to structure. The board has already approved it. Our investors are expecting it." Vanessa turned her gaze to him, her expression calm but resolute. "This isn't about my feelings, Nathan. This is about fundamental business incompatibility. What we witnessed today wasn't an aberration. It was the manifestation of GAD's corporate culture. They've built a system where employees feel empowered to discriminate without consequences, where protocol is secondary to prejudice, where customer dignity is negotiable." She stood and walked to the screen displaying JD's financial data. "We've spent 18 months analyzing their operational weaknesses, their fleet inefficiencies, their route profitability. But we missed the most important metric, their human failure. A company that treats people this way doesn't deserve saving." "But 30,000 jobs," Nathan began. "Will be affected," Vanessa acknowledged. "But the question isn't whether we let GAD fail. The question is what we build in its place." She tapped on her tablet, changing the display to show AirTech Innovation's corporate profile. "AirTech has everything GAD doesn't: modern fleet, progressive management, customer-first culture. What they lack is capital for expansion. We were planning to merge them with GAD, but what if instead we helped them absorb GAD's assets and best personnel after the inevitable bankruptcy?" The room fell silent as her team processed the radical proposal. "You want to let GAD collapse," Sofia said slowly, "and then build something new from the ruins." "Not just new," Vanessa corrected. "Better. An airline built on respect, dignity, and accountability from the ground up." Thomas nodded slowly, catching the vision. "It could work. AirTech has the organizational structure and culture. With our capital and GAD's roots and gates after bankruptcy, they could scale quickly." Nathan remained skeptical. The regulatory hurdles alone would be enormous, not to mention the PR challenges. We'd be seen as vindictive, capitalizing on GAD's downfall that we engineered. "Not if we control the narrative," Vanessa countered. "This isn't about vengeance. It's about values. About building an airline where what happened today couldn't happen. Where dignity isn't a perk for first-class passengers, but a guarantee for everyone." She looked at each team member in turn. "I'm not asking for blind loyalty. I'm asking you to see the opportunity here not just for Pinnacle, but for transformative change in an industry that desperately needs it." Sofia spoke first. "I'm in. Legally, we're on solid ground. The merger agreement has specific conduct clauses that GAD has clearly violated." Thomas nodded. "Operations can start scenario planning tonight. We'll need a 3-phase approach: GAD disengagement, AirTech enhancement, and eventual market repositioning." All eyes turned to Nathan, the financial gatekeeper. He sighed deeply. The numbers could work especially if we move quickly while GAD is vulnerable. But the board won't be easily convinced. Leave the board to me, Vanessa said. I need you all focused on execution. By this time tomorrow, our path will be clear, and GAD will understand exactly what they lost today. As the team dispersed to their respective tasks, Vanessa remained at the table staring at the social media feeds showing clips of her removal from the aircraft. In one, she could clearly see Megan's smug expression, Captain Foster's dismissive glance, Andrew's entitled satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. By treating one black woman as if she didn't matter, they had just sealed the fate of an entire airline. The real work was just beginning. Junior analyst Elizabeth Palmer had never expected to be the center of a corporate crisis team. Yet here she was at midnight directing a team of 6 researchers as they compiled evidence for what was quickly being called Operation Phoenix. Her usual workspace had been transformed into a command center. Screens displayed social media monitoring news alerts and financial data. One entire wall was dedicated to what they were calling the pattern-documented incidents of discrimination by GAD personnel against minority passengers. We've got another one, called out a researcher, adding a marker to the digital map. November 2023. Chicago O'Hare. Black female physician removed after dispute over carry-on placement. Airline claimed she was aggressive, but witness accounts contradict this. Elizabeth nodded, updating her database. That's the 14th incident with this exact pattern in 18 months. Always a minority passenger, always characterized as aggressive or non-compliant, always contradicted by witness accounts. She'd been stunned when Thomas Wilson had personally requested her for this assignment. As one of Pinnacle's newest analysts, she rarely interacted with senior management. But her background in data ethics and pattern recognition made her uniquely qualified for this urgent task. Ms. Palmer Thomas had explained, we need someone who can see beyond the numbers to the human patterns. Dr. Hamilton believes what happened today is part of something larger. Elizabeth had taken the assignment with a personal sense of mission. As a young white woman, she'd witnessed similar incidents, friends and colleagues subjected to scrutiny and suspicion based solely on appearance. She'd always felt helpless. Today, she could actually do something. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Mendez Palmer. We need everything you've got in 30 minutes. Board presentation prep. Elizabeth surveyed her team's progress. They had compiled 27 documented discrimination incidents by GAD personnel in the past 2 years, internal GAD emails revealing a pattern of dismissed complaints, a striking disparity in how disruptive passenger designations were applied along racial lines, social media analysis showing GAD's dismissive response patterns, testimony from 3 former GAD employees about internal culture issues. Package it all, she instructed her team. Visual data, first testimonials, second, financial impact analysis, last. And someone get me the latest on the video reach. A young researcher looked up from his monitor. The main removal video just hit 1 million views. It's being picked up by mainstream outlets now. CNN is running it with the headline, Banking Executive Removed from Flight Discrimination Alleged. Elizabeth nodded. They don't know the half of it yet. She gathered her materials, preparing to deliver the most important presentation of her career. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. What had happened to Dr. Hamilton wasn't an isolated incident or a few bad employees. It was the predictable outcome of a corporate culture that enabled discrimination at every level. As she headed toward the executive floor, her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number contained a video link and a message I was on the flight. Thought you should see this. The flight attendant admitted to the passenger behind me that she knew Dr. Hamilton had the right seat assignment. Said she needed to be taught some respect. Elizabeth watched the clip, her hands shaking slightly. This wasn't just discrimination. This was deliberate, calculated humiliation. She forwarded the clip to Thomas with a simple message. Smoking gun. By the time she reached the executive conference room, her determination had hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about one airline or one incident. This was about exposing and changing the invisible systems that made such incidents possible and inevitable. Dr. Hamilton was waiting along with the entire executive team and legal counsel. Elizabeth set up her presentation aware that what she was about to share would set in motion events that would reshape an entire industry. Ms. Palmer Vanessa said, "Tell us what you've found." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Dr. Hamilton, what happened to you today wasn't an accident, it wasn't a misunderstanding, and it certainly wasn't isolated." She clicked to the first slide. It was the 28th documented incident of this exact pattern at Global Air Dynamics in the past 2 years alone. The evidence spoke for itself. By the time Elizabeth finished her presentation, there wasn't a person in the room who doubted the path forward. This wasn't about one bad day or a few problematic employees. This was about a company whose very structure was built on inequality, inconsistency, and unaccountability. It had to change. And Pinnacle Equity Group was about to ensure it would one way or another. The Pinnacle boardroom, with its sweeping views of Manhattan, had witnessed countless high-stakes decisions, but never one quite like this. Board members arrived for the 8 a.m. emergency meeting to find comprehensive briefing packages at each seat. The packets included everything from Elizabeth Palmer's evidence compilation to legal analysis of the merger agreement to multiple strategic scenarios moving forward. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, no longer in traveling clothes, but impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. Her transformation was deliberate from the passenger they dismissed to the CEO who held their fate in her hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "thank you for convening on such short notice. I've asked you here because Pinnacle faces an unprecedented decision point that requires immediate board guidance." She nodded to Thomas, who activated the main screen displaying the viral videos of her removal from GAD Flight 881. The footage was damning in its clarity. Vanessa calm and reasonable, the crew escalating without cause, the captain dismissive without investigation. "Yesterday, as you can see, I experienced firsthand the corporate culture of the company we were planning to save with a $5 billion investment," Vanessa explained. "What you're witnessing isn't an isolated incident or a few problematic employees. As our analysis demonstrates, this is the predictable outcome of organizational values that run counter to everything Pinnacle stands for." Board member Harold Kingston, known for his conservative business approach, spoke first. "Dr. Hamilton, while I'm deeply disturbed by this footage, I must ask, are we allowing a personal incident, however offensive, to derail a major strategic initiative? The GAD merger has been our primary focus for over a year." Vanessa had anticipated this objection. "A fair question, Harold. I'd like Ms. Palmer to address that specific concern." Elizabeth stepped forward suddenly, facing 12 of the most powerful people in finance. She swallowed her nervousness and spoke clearly. "Board members, what you witnessed in that video wasn't a personal incident. It was a business failure." She tapped her tablet, changing the display to a series of charts. "We've documented 27 similar incidents at GAD in the past 24 months. Each one represents a structural breakdown in customer service employee training, conflict resolution, and accountability." She continued building her case methodically. "When we analyzed the financial impact of these incidents, a clear pattern emerged. Each discriminatory event creates costs that GAD systematically underestimates: legal expenses, reputation damage, customer loss, employee turnover. Our conservative model estimates these uncounted costs at $42 million annually." Harold looked skeptical. "Still just a fraction of the overall merger value." "In isolation, yes," Elizabeth agreed. "But these incidents aren't anomalies. They're symptoms. They indicate fundamental flaws in GAD's operational model, corporate governance, and risk management, all areas critical to the merger's success." She displayed a final slide showing GAD's declining customer satisfaction metrics. "The discrimination we've documented isn't just morally wrong, it's financially unsustainable." Vanessa nodded her thanks as Elizabeth stepped back. The question before us isn't whether to proceed with the GAD merger as planned. That option is no longer viable. The question is what we build instead. She outlined the alternative strategy, allowing GAD to fail, then working with AirTech Innovation to create a new kind of airline, one built from the ground up with accountability and respect as core operating principles. Board member Diana Chen raised a perfectly manicured hand. The financial models for this alternative approach, Nathan Hayes stepped forward. We've run comprehensive scenarios. While the initial investment remains similar, the long-term projections actually improve under the AirTech model. Their operational efficiency is 22% higher than GAD's, and their customer satisfaction metrics are industry-leading. With our capital and eventually GAD's roots and gates after bankruptcy proceedings, we're projecting 18% higher returns over 5 years. And the legal implications of withdrawing from the GAD agreement, asked another board member. Sofia Mendez answered confidently. The merger agreement includes specific conduct clauses that GAD has clearly violated. Section 7.3 explicitly states that material evidence of institutional discrimination constitutes grounds for immediate termination without penalty. We're on solid legal ground. For the next hour, the board grilled the executive team, testing every assumption, challenging every projection. Vanessa watched with quiet pride as her team defended the strategy with data logic and unwavering conviction. Finally, board chair Edward Morgan called for a vote. All in favor of terminating the Global Air Dynamics merger agreement and pursuing the alternative AirTech strategy, as outlined, one by one, hands raised. When the final count was tallied, the vote was unanimous. Edward turned to Vanessa. Dr. Hamilton, you have the board's full support, but I caution you, this path will be scrutinized like none other. Many will claim this is personal vengeance rather than sound business strategy. Vanessa nodded, acknowledging the challenge. Then we'll need to ensure our actions speak louder than their accusations. This isn't about punishment. It's about building something better from the ground up. As the board members filed out, Harold Kingston paused beside Vanessa. For what it's worth, he said quietly, what they did to you on that plane, it was wrong. My daughter experienced something similar last year. Nobody listened then either. Vanessa met his gaze. Then let's build a world where people have to listen. With the board's approval secured, Vanessa gathered her executive team. It's done. Effective immediately, all GAD merger activities cease. Notify their board that we're invoking Clause 7.3 to terminate the agreement. She turned to Thomas. And schedule a meeting with Rafael Morales at AirTech. It's time to build something new. By noon, the business world would be in shock. By the end of the day, GAD stock would be in freefall. And by the end of the week, an industry would be forced to confront its darkest failures, one viral video at a time. The revolution had begun. The AirTech Innovation headquarters in San Francisco couldn't have been more different from GAD's staid Manhattan offices. The open, light-filled space buzzed with energy, its walls adorned with aviation innovations rather than portraits of former executives. Rafael Morales, AirTech's founder and CEO, paced nervously as he awaited Vanessa's arrival. When she'd called, requesting an urgent meeting, he'd assumed the worst. Perhaps Pinnacle was cutting all aviation investments after the GAD fiasco. When Vanessa entered, flanked by Thomas and Nathan, Rafael greeted her with cautious respect. Dr. Hamilton, I was horrified by what happened to you. The whole industry is talking about it. Thank you, Rafael, but I'm not here to discuss that incident. I'm here to talk about the future of aviation. Vanessa took a seat at the conference table, gesturing for Rafael to join her. How would you like to become the largest airline in North America? Rafael blinked, certain he'd misheard. Excuse me, you heard correctly, Vanessa continued calmly. Pinnacle is withdrawing from the GAD merger. That company is facing a future I wouldn't invest in. But AirTech, your vision, your culture, your innovation, that's where the real opportunity lies. For the next 2 hours, they outlined a bold strategy. Pinnacle would invest $5 billion in AirTech's expansion, enabling it to rapidly scale operations. When GAD inevitably faltered under the weight of its failures, AirTech would be positioned to acquire key assets, routes, and talented personnel. Raphael listened intently, his initial skepticism giving way to excitement. This is audacious. But the regulatory hurdles alone will be substantial, Vanessa acknowledged. That's why timing is critical. This isn't a hostile takeover in the traditional sense. We're creating a lifeboat for what matters at GAD while allowing what doesn't work to fall away naturally. Thomas pulled up a presentation detailing the 3-phase approach: immediate expansion of AirTech operations, strategic preparation for GAD's market contraction, and eventually selective acquisition of GAD assets through normal bankruptcy proceedings. The key difference, Vanessa explained, is that we're not just changing ownership. We're fundamentally reimagining what an airline can be, and that starts with the Dignity Protocol. She shared her vision for an airline where respect wasn't just a training module but the core operating principle, where accountability wasn't just for frontline employees but built into every level of the organization, where passenger dignity wasn't a luxury but a basic expectation. Imagine an airline, she said, her voice passionate, where every employee undergoes experiential training to understand what it feels like to be disrespected, dismissed, or discriminated against, where technology creates transparency rather than obscuring accountability, where customer feedback isn't filtered through corporate PR but displayed in real time for all to see. Raphael's eyes lit up. We've been developing something similar, what we call the trust metric. It's an algorithm that tracks passenger experience at every touch point, creating accountability throughout the journey. Exactly? Vanessa nodded. Now imagine scaling that across an entire airline, creating a new industry standard that others would have to follow or lose market share. As they delved into specifics, Raphael's initial caution transformed into strategic excitement. This wasn't just a business opportunity, it was the chance to create lasting change in an industry notorious for treating customers as inconveniences rather than the reason for its existence. By afternoon, the framework of an agreement was taking shape. AirTech would remain independent with Pinnacle as its primary investor. The capital infusion would fund immediate expansion of routes, aircraft acquisition, and technological development. Most importantly, the Dignity Protocol would become the foundation of the entire operation. There's one more thing, Vanessa said as they prepared to conclude. I want a personal guarantee that every employee from GAD who loses their job through no fault of their own will have the opportunity to reapply with AirTech. This isn't about punishing 30,000 people for the actions of a few. Raphael nodded solemnly. Agreed. But they'll need to embrace our culture. No exceptions. No exceptions, Vanessa confirmed. As they shook hands on the preliminary agreement, Raphael couldn't help but ask, why us? You could have approached any airline after walking away from GAD. Vanessa smiled slightly. Because when I researched your company, I found something remarkable. In 5 years of operation, you've never had a single discrimination complaint upheld against you. Not one. In this industry, that's not just unusual, it's revolutionary. As Vanessa's team departed, Raphael remained in the conference room staring at the hastily sketched plans that would transform his regional carrier into an industry giant. All because one woman had been treated with disrespect on a flight and had the power to do something about it. He pulled out his phone and called his head of operations. Maria, clear my calendar for the week. We're about to change everything. Back on the Pinnacle corporate jet, Vanessa had decided commercial flights were too risky for the moment. Her team was already implementing the next phase. Press releases were being drafted. Legal documents were being finalized. And a carefully worded termination notice was being delivered to GAD's board of directors. The message was clear. Dignity wasn't just a moral imperative. It was now a business one as well. And companies that failed to recognize this would soon find themselves relics of a past no one wanted to return to. William Stevens, CEO of Global Air Dynamics, stared at the email on his screen as if it were written in an incomprehensible language. His hands, usually steady from decades of corporate leadership, trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. "Get the executive team in the boardroom, now. And someone find out what the hell happened on Flight 881 yesterday." Within 30 minutes, GAD's leadership had assembled. The tension in the room was palpable as Stevens paced at the head of the table, the termination notice from Pinnacle projected on the wall behind him. "Will someone please explain?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "How we lost a $5 billion lifeline over a seating dispute." CFO Amanda Bennett was the first to speak, her voice tight with controlled panic. "The Pinnacle termination cites violation of Conduct Clause 7.3. They're claiming institutional discrimination based on an incident involving their CEO yesterday." Their CEO, Stevens, stopped pacing. "What CEO?" Dr. Vanessa Hamilton. Amanda replied, pulling up a photo on her tablet. "Founder of Pinnacle Equity Group. According to these reports, she was removed from Flight 881 after refusing to give up her assigned seat." Stevens sank into his chair, the blood draining from his face. "Are you telling me we kicked the head of our financing partner off one of our planes? The woman who was about to save this airline from bankruptcy?" Head of Operations Robert Thompson cleared his throat. "Sir, initial reports from the crew characterized the incident as a standard non-compliance situation. The passenger, Dr. Hamilton, refused crew instructions regarding seating. And did anyone bother to check if she was in the correct seat?" Stevens demanded. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "Jesus Christ," Stevens muttered. "Tell me there's no video." Amanda grimaced. "There are multiple videos, sir, all showing the same thing." Dr. Hamilton calmly requesting verification of her seat assignment. "Our crew refusing. The situation escalating until she was removed by airport security." She hesitated. "The videos have gone viral. Over 2 million views already." Stevens slammed his hand on the table. "This is a PR nightmare, but it's fixable. We issue an immediate apology offer, compensation, discipline the crew members involved. We can salvage the deal." Head of Legal. David Martinez shook his head. "It's too late for that. Pinnacle's termination is effective immediately. Their board has unanimously approved an alternative investment strategy with AirTech Innovation." AirTech. "That regional startup," Stevens scoffed. "They're going to dump us for a company with 30 planes and a handful of West Coast routes." 30 planes now, Amanda corrected quietly. "But with Pinnacle's $5 billion, they'll expand rapidly." Meanwhile, she pulled up a real-time stock tracker. GAD shares had already dropped 15% since the market opened. "We're in free fall. The merger was our lifeline. Without it—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room knew the truth. GAD had been struggling for years, burdened by an aging fleet, rising costs, and declining customer satisfaction. The Pinnacle merger had been their salvation, a chance to modernize, restructure, and survive in an increasingly competitive market. Now that chance was gone. "This is absurd," Stevens insisted. "One incident can't justify terminating a $5 billion deal. It's emotional overreaction, not sound business judgment." Head of Human Resources. Victoria Lopez spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, according to my sources, Pinnacle has compiled evidence of a pattern of similar incidents. They're claiming this wasn't isolated, but rather evidence of institutional issues." "What pattern? What evidence?" Stevens demanded. Victoria pulled out a folder. "I've identified 27 similar complaints in the past 2 years, all involving minority passengers, all claiming unfair treatment, all dismissed by our customer relations department as unsubstantiated." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. "Fix this," Stevens finally said, his voice hollow. "Whatever it takes. Call Hamilton directly. Offer her a personal apology, a board seat. Anything. "We've tried," Amanda replied. "All calls are being redirected to their legal department. They're not engaging in any discussion of reconsideration." Stevens stared out the window at the Manhattan skyline, suddenly feeling like a captain watching his ship take on water. "What are our options if the Pinnacle deal is truly dead?" Amanda's response was blunt. "Without that capital infusion, we have approximately 6 months of operational runway before we'd need to consider Chapter 11. 6 months, Stevens repeated numbly. To find $5 billion from investors who will now see us as the airline that discriminates against black passengers. No one had a response to that. As the meeting dissolved into desperate strategizing, Stevens remained at the window watching GAD's stock price continue its relentless decline on his phone. In the reflection of the glass, he could see the portraits of former CEOs lining the wall behind him, stern white men from another era, watching as their legacy crumbled because one black woman had been treated as if she didn't belong. The irony wasn't lost on him, but the recognition came far too late to save what was already breaking apart. Breaking news from the business world with significant social implications, the CNN anchor announced her expression serious. Global Air Dynamics stock has plummeted over 20% following the shocking withdrawal of a $5 billion investment from Pinnacle Equity Group. This comes after viral videos showed Pinnacle CEO Dr. Vanessa Hamilton being forcibly removed from a GAD flight in what many are calling a clear case of racial discrimination. The screen split to show a panel of commentators. "This isn't just a business story," said a prominent civil rights attorney. "This is about power dynamics and who gets believed." Dr. Hamilton, despite her credentials and status, was treated with the same dismissive disrespect that countless passengers of color experience daily. A financial analyst jumped in. "The business implications are staggering." GAD was already in a precarious position. Without the Pinnacle merger, we're looking at possible bankruptcy within 6 to 12 months, and the reputational damage may be irreparable. Across the media landscape, the story was exploding. Business publications focused on the financial fallout. Social media amplified the videos and personal testimonials from others who had experienced similar treatment. News outlets dissected every moment of the incident with body language experts, analyzing the crew's dismissive attitudes and Hamilton's composed dignity. "What makes this case unique," explained a cultural commentator on MSNBC, "is that for once, the power dynamic was reversed. Dr. Hamilton had the ability to respond in a way most victims of discrimination cannot, by withdrawing $5 billion in financing. It's forcing us to consider what is the true cost of discrimination when we can actually measure it." GAD's PR team was in crisis mode, issuing a statement that only made matters worse. Global Air Dynamics regrets the misunderstanding on Flight 881 and is investigating the incident. "Our crew members work diligently to ensure all passengers follow safety protocols. We have reached out to Dr. Hamilton to address her concerns and remain committed to treating all customers with respect." The response was immediately criticized for its tone-deaf approach, placing the blame on a misunderstanding rather than acknowledging discriminatory treatment. Passenger testimonials began emerging. Lydia Rodriguez, who had tried to defend Hamilton on the flight, gave an emotional interview. "They threatened to remove me just for recording what was happening. It was clear they didn't want evidence of how they were treating her." Another passenger, retired Professor James Williams, described the incident from his perspective in row 16. "There was absolutely no justification for how they treated that woman. She remained calm and reasonable throughout while the crew became increasingly aggressive. It was uncomfortable to witness." Meanwhile, Pinnacle maintained dignified silence, issuing only a brief statement. Pinnacle Equity Group confirms termination of its merger agreement with Global Air Dynamics, citing violation of Conduct Clause 7.3. "We are pursuing alternative investments in the aviation sector that align with our corporate values of excellence, innovation, and dignity for all." The restraint only added to Pinnacle's credibility, contrasting sharply with GAD's defensive posturing. By evening, financial news was dominated by speculation about GAD's survival prospects. Industry analysts highlighted the difficulty of securing alternative financing in the current climate. "Who's going to step in with $5 billion now?" asked a Bloomberg analyst. "This isn't just about money anymore. It's about associating your brand with a company that's become the poster child for corporate discrimination." Aviation forums buzzed with insider rumors. Former and current GAD employees shared anonymous accounts of a corporate culture that prioritized efficiency over humanity, metrics over morale. One thread titled "The Real GAD" accumulated hundreds of comments describing a work environment where discrimination complaints were systematically buried and employees who raised concerns faced retaliation. As night fell, social media campaigns emerged with hashtags like #BoycottGAD and #IStandWithVanessa. Celebrities and influencers shared their own experiences of discrimination in travel. Corporate partners began quietly distancing themselves from the airline concerned about association with the unfolding crisis. In their respective headquarters, two leaders faced very different evenings. William Stevens huddled with crisis managers, legal advisors, and PR consultants, desperately trying to contain a disaster that was already beyond control. Meanwhile, Vanessa Hamilton reviewed final details of the AirTech agreement, laying the groundwork for a new kind of airline that would rise from the ashes of the old. The contrast couldn't have been starker, one fighting to preserve a broken status quo, the other building its replacement. By morning, GAD's stock had fallen another 10%. The message was clear in the court of public opinion and market valuation. The verdict was already in, and it wasn't in GAD's favor. The GAD crew lounge at JFK Terminal 4 had never felt so tense. Flight attendants, pilots, and gate agents clustered in small groups, voices, hushed expressions, worried. On the wall-mounted television, financial news showed GAD's stock in continuous decline, the ticker like a digital EKG of a dying patient. Megan Wilson sat alone, her uniform impeccable as always, but her face drawn with stress. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, some supportive, many accusatory. As the flight attendant at the center of the Hamilton incident, she had become an unwilling lightning rod. The door opened and Captain James Foster entered, his usual commanding presence diminished. He spotted Megan and hesitated before joining her, aware of the eyes following him. "HR wants to see us," he said quietly. "Both of us. Purser Thompson and Gate Agent Parker, too." Megan nodded stiffly. "I was just following procedure, James. She wasn't in her assigned seat." Captain Foster didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was heavy. "Are you sure about that, Megan? Because I've seen the boarding passes now. Hers said 14A. It always said 14A. "That's not what I saw," Megan insisted, but doubt crept into her voice. "Isn't it?" A new voice joined them. Daniel Thompson, the head purser from Flight 881, looked haggard, his usual crisp appearance rumpled. Or did we see what we expected to see, a black woman in casual clothes who couldn't possibly belong in premium seating? "That's not fair," Megan protested. "It had nothing to do with race." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the board of directors watching our stock implode. Tell that to the 30,000 employees whose jobs are now at risk because we couldn't be bothered to scan a boarding pass." Their argument was interrupted as Victoria Lopez, head of HR, entered with two security officers. Her expression was grim. "Ms. Wilson, Captain Foster, Mr. Thompson, please come with me. Mr. Parker is already waiting." They followed her in silence to a conference room where Richard Parker sat looking shell-shocked. On the table were 4 folders and 4 letters. "As you know, Victoria began Global Air Dynamics is facing unprecedented crisis following the events on Flight 881. After reviewing all available evidence, including security footage and passenger recordings, the board has made several decisions." She slid a letter toward each of them. "Effective immediately, all 4 of you are placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Your security credentials are temporarily suspended. You will continue to receive pay, but are prohibited from representing GAD in any capacity." Richard blanched. This is an overreaction. We were just doing our jobs. Victoria's expression hardened. Were you Mr. Parker? Because our investigation indicates multiple protocol violations. Boarding passes weren't properly verified. Conflict resolution procedures weren't followed. Discriminatory language was used. She paused. And, most disturbingly, there's evidence suggesting deliberate misrepresentation of Dr. Hamilton's seat assignment. Megan paled. That's not... Save it for the investigation. Victoria cut her off. The damage is done. We're now fighting for the survival of this airline. If any of you have information that could help mitigate this disaster, now is the time to share it. The room fell silent. Then, surprisingly, Captain Foster spoke. I failed, he said quietly. I never verified anything myself. I accepted my crew's characterization of the situation and made a command decision based on incomplete and it seems incorrect information. He looked at his colleagues. We all failed. And now 30,000 people might lose their jobs because of it. Victoria nodded grimly. The immediate consequences are just the beginning. JAD has initiated what we're calling the Accountability Project, a comprehensive review of our culture policies and practices related to customer treatment. Nothing is off the table. As they absorbed this information, a junior HR staff member entered and whispered urgently to Victoria. Her expression darkened further. I've just been informed that American Express has suspended GAD from their Premium Travel Partners program, citing concerns about customer treatment standards. Delta has also announced they're reviewing their code share agreement with us. The implications were devastating. Premium partnerships were a critical revenue source for the struggling airline. Their loss would accelerate GAD's financial freefall. This isn't just about one incident anymore, Victoria continued. This is about survival. If we can't convince the market that GAD is capable of fundamental change, there won't be an airline left to save. As the meeting concluded and they were escorted from the building, each employee faced their own reckoning. Richard couldn't meet the eyes of colleagues they passed in the hallway. Megan fought back tears of frustration and fear. Daniel moved mechanically, already calculating the damage to his career and future prospects. Only Captain Foster seemed to have found some clarity in the disaster. As they reached the exit, he turned to his colleagues. We need to tell the truth, he said simply. All of it. No more denials, no more deflections. If there's any chance of saving this airline and our colleagues' jobs, it starts with taking responsibility. As they stepped outside, a crowd of reporters surged forward, cameras flashing questions overlapping in a cacophony of accusation and inquiry. The four employees froze suddenly, face to face with the public reckoning they had triggered. Behind them, GAD headquarters continued its normal operations, but the atmosphere had changed. Employees moved with new caution, aware that their company's survival now hung in the balance. Many updated resumes during lunch breaks. Others whispered about rumors that AirTech was already preparing to hire displaced GAD workers, when not if the bankruptcy came. The fallout was just beginning, and everyone knew it. The aviation industry rarely experienced seismic shifts. It was a sector defined by incremental change, regulatory caution, and entrenched practices. The GAD Hamilton incident changed that overnight. At United Airlines headquarters in Chicago, CEO Laura Jenkins called an emergency meeting of her executive team. I want a comprehensive audit of every passenger removal in the last 3 years, she instructed. Every incident involving allegations of discriminatory treatment needs to be reviewed by independent evaluators, not our internal team. And I want our new anti-bias training program accelerated full implementation in 30 days, not 6 months. Her team exchanged nervous glances. That's an aggressive timeline, the COO pointed out. Jenkins leveled her gaze at him. Less aggressive than watching our stock tank 30% in 2 days. What's happening to GAD could happen to any of us unless we get ahead of it. Across the industry, similar conversations were unfolding. Delta implemented an emergency review of its passenger conflict resolution protocols. American Airlines announced a partnership with a civil rights organization to redesign its crew training. Smaller carriers scrambled to demonstrate their commitment to equitable treatment. The ripple effects extended beyond airlines. TSA launched an internal review of screening procedures and potential bias in passenger selection. Airport authorities revisited security protocols. Even aircraft manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus issued statements affirming their commitment to designing cabins that treated all passengers with dignity. Meanwhile, aviation regulators found themselves under scrutiny. The Department of Transportation announced a formal investigation into discrimination complaints across the industry. The FAA faced questions about its oversight of airline customer service standards. This isn't just about one airline or one incident, Transportation Secretary Maria Rodriguez stated in a press conference. This is about ensuring that our national aviation system serves all Americans with equal respect and dignity. We're launching a comprehensive review to determine whether existing regulations are sufficient to prevent discriminatory practices. Industry publications that normally focused on fleet acquisitions and route expansions now featured headlines like "The Cost of Bias Lessons from the GAD Meltdown" and "Building Inclusive Aviation Beyond Diversity Training." For employees across the aviation sector, the message was clear. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was now a recognized business liability. What had once been dismissed as soft issues of customer experience were suddenly central to corporate survival. The consulting industry quickly pivoted to meet the new demand. Firms specializing in diversity and inclusion saw their aviation sector business explode overnight. McKinsey, BCG, and other major consultancies rushed to develop specialized offerings in aviation equity and experience design. At industry conferences, panel discussions on bias and accountability replaced traditional topics. Airline executives who had never uttered the word discrimination now spoke passionately about their commitment to equitable treatment. Not everyone embraced the change. Old guard executives grumbled about political correctness and overreaction. Industry forums featured heated debates about whether airlines were capitulating to pressure rather than addressing real issues. But the market spoke clearly. Airlines that responded proactively saw their stocks stabilize or even rise slightly. Those that hesitated or issued tone-deaf statements watched their valuations slide. For Rafael Morales at AirTech, the industry upheaval represented unprecedented opportunity. His phone rang constantly with calls from suppliers, airports, and potential partners eager to align with what was being called the airline of the future. "We've been advocating for a human-centered approach to aviation for years," he told a reporter from Aviation Weekly. "The difference is that now the market recognizes its value. What happened to Dr. Hamilton was a tragedy, but it's catalyzing change that's long overdue." The most significant signal came when Southwest Airlines CEO Michael Williams reached out to Vanessa Hamilton directly requesting guidance on implementing similar accountability systems at his airline. "We want to be part of the solution," Williams told her during their video call. What happened at GAD revealed vulnerabilities that exist throughout our industry. We need to address them not cosmetically. Vanessa appreciated the initiative but remained cautious. "Real change requires more than new policies or training modules," she explained. "It requires reconsidering the fundamental power dynamics between airlines and passengers, between management and frontline employees. Are you prepared for that level of transformation?" Williams nodded soberly. "We have to be. What we've witnessed isn't just GAD's failure, it's an industry-wide wake-up call, and those who hit the snooze button won't survive." As the conversation concluded, Vanessa reflected on the cascading effects of that moment on Flight 881. What had begun as personal humiliation was catalyzing an industry-wide reckoning. The true measure of success wouldn't be GAD's downfall, but the transformation of air travel for everyone who had ever felt marginalized, dismissed, or discriminated against. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated, and it was just beginning. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. Amanda Bennett stared at her financial dashboard, each indicator more alarming than the last GAD stock, down 42% in 3 days. Market capitalization reduced by $3.8 billion. Credit rating downgraded to junk status by both Moody's and S&P. Forward bookings declined 28% week over week. Corporate account cancellations. 64 major clients and counting. She had been CFO of Global Air Dynamics for 7 years, navigating fuel price spikes, labor disputes, and a global pandemic. But she had never seen anything like this, a financial free fall triggered by a single incident that had exposed the company's deepest flaws. The quarterly investor call, normally a routine exercise in managed expectations, had become a brutal interrogation. Institutional investors demanded explanations. Analysts questioned GAD's survival prospects. Even longtime supporters expressed doubts about the airline's future. Without the Pinnacle capital infusion. "What's your runway?" asked a Morgan Stanley analyst bluntly. "We're exploring alternative financing options," Amanda had replied, the corporate euphemism transparent to everyone on the call. "Meaning you have none," the analyst had countered. "Given your debt load and the current crisis is." Chapter 11. Reorganization, now inevitable. William Stevens had interjected, attempting to project confidence. "We're implementing comprehensive changes to address the underlying issues highlighted by the recent incident. We believe in the resilience of our brand and the loyalty of our customer base." The market's response had been immediate and unmerciful. The stock dropped another 5% during the call itself. Now alone in her office, Amanda faced the stark reality. Without a miracle, GAD had approximately 4 months of operational capacity before cash flow problems would force difficult decisions. The emergency financial measures, hiring freezes, discretionary spending cuts, route consolidation would buy time, but not salvation. Her phone buzzed with a text from the head of sales losing American Express corporate accounts. Their travel manager cited alignment with corporate values as the reason. Estimated revenue impact $42 million annually. Amanda closed her eyes briefly. The exodus was accelerating. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. David Martinez, head of legal, entered without waiting for a response. His expression said everything. "The class action paperwork was just filed," he announced grimly. 27 plaintiffs alleging discriminatory treatment on GAD flights over the past 3 years. They're seeking certification to represent all minority passengers who experienced similar incidents. Damages Amanda asked already, calculating the potential liability. They're claiming $50 million in direct damages, plus punitive. But that's not the worst part. David placed a folder on her desk. Their lead counsel is Torres & Williams. Amanda's blood ran cold. Torres & Williams was the premier civil rights litigation firm in the country, with a reputation for rejecting settlements in favor of public trials that forced institutional change. "They don't want our money," she realized aloud. "They want discovery. Internal emails, training materials, complaint records, everything that would expose—" "Exactly," David confirmed. "They're after evidence of institutional discrimination. And based on our initial review," he hesitated, "they'll find it. The internal classification systems for passenger complaints, the dismissal rates for discrimination allegations, the crew reporting procedures, it all creates a pattern that looks damning in retrospect." Amanda nodded slowly, adding this new threat to her mental calculation of GAD's survival prospects. The numbers grew even bleaker. "What about the commercial real estate sale?" "The gates at LaGuardia and O'Hare." David shook his head. "The potential buyers know we're desperate. They're lowballing us at 60 cents on the dollar. And the union is pushing back, saying asset sales violate their contract terms without consultation." The walls were closing in from all sides. Financial markets, corporate clients, legal challenges, employee relations. Each dimension of the business was unraveling simultaneously. Amanda's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. AirTech Innovation announces plans to expand routes by 300% following major capital investment from Pinnacle Equity Group. The timing wasn't coincidental. AirTech was strategically positioning itself to capture GAD's market share as the legacy carrier faltered. It was a brilliant business move executed with precision that Amanda might have admired under different circumstances. "We need to consider Chapter 11, she said finally. "Voluntary reorganization might be our only option to preserve any value." David nodded grimly. "I'll have the team prepare preliminary filings. But we should be realistic, this won't be a reorganization. No investor will touch us now. This would be the first step toward liquidation." The reality hung heavy in the air. 30,000 jobs, decades of aviation history, a once proud American institution, all potentially lost because they couldn't be bothered to verify a seat assignment. The true cost of discrimination was becoming brutally clear, quantified in billions of dollars, thousands of livelihoods, and the collapse of a company that had once seemed too established to fail. As Amanda updated her financial projections to include the new legal liabilities, she couldn't help but think of Dr. Vanessa Hamilton, the passenger they had dismissed, the investor they had lost, the catalyst for their unraveling. How differently things might have turned out if just one person on that plane had chosen dignity over dismissal, verification, over assumption, respect, over convenience. But no one had. And now everyone would pay the price. The announcement came not with a flashy press conference, but with a simple video posted simultaneously across all major platforms. Rafael Morales, dressed in a casual button-down rather than the expected executive suit, stood in an AirTech hangar beside a single aircraft. "Today I'm excited to announce a partnership that will transform air travel in North America." He began his tone conversational rather than performative. "Pinnacle Equity Group is investing $5 billion in AirTech Innovation, enabling us to expand our routes by 300%, modernize our fleet, and most importantly, bring our human-centered approach to millions more passengers." The camera panned to include Vanessa Hamilton, who stood beside him in simple, elegant business attire. "This investment isn't just about growth," Vanessa explained. "It's about fundamentally reimagining what an airline can be. We're building an aviation experience where dignity isn't a premium feature, but the foundation of everything we do." The video continued with details of the expansion, new routes connecting 47 cities, fleet growth from 30 to 120 aircraft, within 18 months, thousands of new jobs, and most significantly, the implementation of the Dignity Protocol across all operations. The market response was immediate and powerful. While GAD's stock continued its precipitous decline, AirTech, newly listed on the NASDAQ, saw its share price surge 68% by closing bell. Aviation analysts scrambled to understand the implications of this new player suddenly scaling to major carrier status. "This isn't just a new competitor," explained a JP Morgan analyst on CNBC. "This is a completely different business model entering the mainstream market. AirTech has built their entire operation around customer experience, rather than operational efficiency at all costs. With Pinnacle's capital, they can now scale that approach nationally." At AirTech's San Francisco headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Employees gathered in the main atrium to watch a live stream of their first major aircraft delivery, a state-of-the-art Airbus A321neo, painted in AirTech's distinctive silver and green livery. "This is just the beginning," Rafael told the cheering staff. "Today, one new plane. By the end of the year, 40 more. And with each aircraft comes the opportunity to show more passengers what air travel should be." Behind the excitement lay meticulous planning. The expansion strategy had been carefully designed to maximize impact while managing growth. AirTech would first strengthen its presence on key business routes where GAD was most vulnerable, then gradually expand to additional markets as capacity allowed. The hiring push began immediately. AirTech launched what it called the Dignity First Initiative, recruiting experienced aviation professionals committed to a new approach. Most controversial was their explicit invitation to current GAD employees. "We recognize that most GAD staff had nothing to do with recent incidents," the recruitment page stated. "We welcome applications from GAD employees who share our values and vision. This isn't about poaching talent, it's about preserving aviation jobs during industry transformation." The message resonated powerfully. Within 48 hours, AirTech had received over 4,000 applications from GAD employees across all departments from pilots to ground staff. As operations expanded, the Dignity Protocol moved from concept to implementation. Every aspect of the passenger experience was reimagined. Electronic seat verification became mandatory for all seating disputes. Crew members were equipped with body cameras during potential conflict situations. Real-time customer feedback was displayed publicly throughout terminals. An independent oversight committee reviewed all passenger removal incidents. Performance metrics prioritized equitable treatment alongside operational efficiency. Crew evaluations incorporated observed behavior rather than just technical compliance. Perhaps most revolutionary was the trust metric, a real-time measurement of passenger experience displayed prominently on the AirTech app in terminals and on the company's homepage. Unlike traditional satisfaction surveys, the trust metric captured specific indicators of respectful treatment, transparent communication, and equitable enforcement of policies. "We're not hiding from accountability," Raphael explained in an interview with Aviation Today. "We're embracing it as our competitive advantage." The aviation industry watched with a mixture of skepticism and concern as AirTech's rapid expansion continued. Legacy carriers scrambled to implement surface-level changes to their own operations, but few were willing to embrace the deeper structural transformation that AirTech represented. "It's easy to change uniforms or update training modules," noted an industry consultant. "It's much harder to change the underlying culture and incentive structures that enable discriminatory behavior. Most airlines are still treating this as a PR problem rather than an operational one." Meanwhile, Vanessa Hamilton maintained a careful balance between involvement and independence. While Pinnacle provided the capital and strategic guidance for AirTech's expansion, the day-to-day operations remained under Raphael's leadership. Vanessa's focus was on ensuring the Dignity Protocol became embedded in every aspect of the business. "This isn't about micromanaging," she explained to her executive team. "It's about creating the conditions where dignity becomes the default rather than the exception. We're not just building a bigger airline, we're building a better one." 3 months after the partnership announcement, AirTech launched service on its first former GAD route, New York to Los Angeles. The inaugural flight departed from the same terminal where Vanessa had been removed from Flight 881. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the passengers who chose this new alternative to the struggling legacy carrier. Among them was Lydia Rodriguez, the passenger who had tried to defend Vanessa on that fateful flight. "It feels different," she told a reporter at the gate. "Not just the new planes or the technology. There's a different energy from the staff, like they actually see you as a person, not just a seat number." As AirTech's expansion continued, the contrast with GAD's decline grew starker. While one airline built its future on dignity and accountability, the other collapsed under the weight of its entrenched practices and the financial consequences of discrimination. The transformation had begun, and it would reshape an industry long overdue for change. The AirTech Training Center in Phoenix bore little resemblance to traditional airline facilities. Instead of simulated cabins and technical equipment, new employees began their journey in what was called the Experience Room, a space designed to create empathy through immersion. Today's class included 15 former GAD employees, among them pilots, flight attendants, and gate agents. They entered nervously uncertain what to expect from this unorthodox approach. Training Director Maria Alvarez welcomed them with warm professionalism. Today isn't about procedures or regulations. It's about experience, specifically the experience of being on the receiving end of biased treatment. She divided them into groups, assigning each person a different identity. Some were flagged as high-maintenance passengers without explanation. Others were marked as potential security concerns based on arbitrary characteristics. A few received VIP designations, while others were classified as basic economy regardless of their assigned seating. What followed was a carefully crafted simulation of a typical flight experience: check-in, security, boarding, in-flight service, and deplaning, with AirTech staff playing the roles of airline personnel. Throughout the simulation, participants were treated according to their assigned classifications rather than as individuals. VIPs received prompt, friendly service. Basic economy passengers were addressed curtly, made to wait, and consistently treated as inconveniences. High-maintenance travelers had their requests questioned or dismissed. Security concerns faced additional scrutiny at every step, with staff using terms like protocol and procedure to justify differential treatment. By the simulation's end, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. Frustration and discomfort were evident on every face. Began a former GAD pilot struggling to find words. Dehumanizing, finished another participant, a veteran flight attendant. I've never felt so insignificant. Maria nodded. Now imagine experiencing that regularly, knowing it's based not on some random assignment for a training exercise, but on your appearance, accent, or name. The group fell silent, absorbing the implications. This isn't about making you feel guilty, Maria continued. It's about creating understanding that goes beyond intellectual awareness. Every AirTech employee experiences this simulation because we believe empathy is the foundation of dignity. This experiential approach was just the beginning of AirTech's revolutionary training program. Over the next 2 weeks, new employees would participate in intensive workshops on unconscious bias, conflict de-escalation, equitable enforcement of policies, and the technical implementation of the Dignity Protocol. The protocol itself was comprehensive, touching every aspect of airline operations. The verification standard required electronic confirmation of all passenger documentation, eliminating subjective judgments about who looked like they belonged in certain seats. Every boarding pass was scanned, every seat assignment confirmed digitally, every upgrade or reassignment documented in the system. The accountability chain ensured that responsibility didn't stop with frontline staff. Supervisors, managers, and executives shared accountability for passenger treatment. If a dignity violation occurred, everyone in the decision chain was subject to review, not just the employee who executed the action. The transparency framework made both policies and their enforcement visible to all stakeholders. Passengers could access real-time data on everything from on-time performance to complaint resolution patterns. Employee evaluations incorporated dignity metrics alongside technical skills and efficiency measures. Perhaps most revolutionary was the Dignity Index, a real-time measurement displayed throughout terminals on the airline's app and on every employee's dashboard. The index aggregated multiple data points: passenger feedback, observed interactions, policy, consistency, response times, complaint resolutions, and independent evaluations. Any significant drop triggered immediate review and intervention. The key innovation here isn't technological, explained Raphael to industry observers. It's philosophical. We've created a system where dignity isn't subjective or optional. It's measurable, accountable, and central to our business model. Implementation extended beyond training and metrics to the physical environment. Aircraft interiors were redesigned to reduce stress points and potential conflicts. Gate areas featured transparent workstations where agents processed passenger information in full view, eliminating the mystery and perceived arbitrariness of decisions. Technology played a crucial role in supporting these changes. The AirTech app provided passengers with real-time updates on every aspect of their journey, reducing anxiety and the need for confrontational information seeking. Automated alerts notified supervisors of potential dignity risk situations before they escalated to conflicts. Body cameras, initially controversial, became standard equipment for customer-facing staff during potential conflict situations. Unlike law enforcement implementations, these cameras were passenger-activated and dual-facing, recording both employee and passenger behavior to ensure contextual understanding of any incident. "We're not monitoring our employees to catch them doing something wrong," Raphael emphasized. "We're creating a system where everyone, staff and passengers alike, is accountable for treating each other with respect." The results were remarkable. Within 6 months of implementing the Dignity Protocol, AirTech reported 94% reduction in passenger removal incidents, 87% decrease in formal complaints, 72% improvement in employee satisfaction scores, 68% reduction in staff turnover. Most significantly, the trust metric maintained consistent scores across all passenger demographics regardless of race, gender, age, or status. The airline had created a system where equitable treatment wasn't aspirational, but operational. As industry observers studied the AirTech model, many remained skeptical about its scalability and financial sustainability. It's easy to maintain these standards with a new fleet, limited routes, and the spotlight of public attention, noted an aviation consultant. The real test will come with growth, operational pressures, and the inevitable normalization of expectations. Raphael welcomed the challenge. "We've designed this system specifically to withstand pressure and scale. Dignity isn't a luxury feature we offer when convenient, it's the foundation of our entire operation. And we're proving daily that treating people with respect isn't just morally right, it's good business." As the transformation continued, one question remained prominent in industry discussions. Would AirTech's approach remain an exception in aviation, or would it become the new standard that all airlines would eventually have to meet? The answer was still unfolding. But with each new route launched, each new aircraft delivered, and each new passenger experiencing the difference, the balance was shifting toward a future where dignity wasn't optional, but essential. The revolution wasn't just growing, it was winning. The GAD emergency board meeting had been underway for 6 hours, the tension palpable in the Manhattan conference room. Financial reports, legal updates, and market analyses painted an increasingly desperate picture. William Stevens, once the confident CEO of a legacy carrier, now looked haggard as he addressed the grim-faced directors. "Our situation has deteriorated faster than anticipated," he admitted, the understatement evident to everyone present. "The Pinnacle financing is gone. Our stock has lost 65% of its value in 4 months. Corporate accounts are fleeing to competitors. And now we're facing a class action lawsuit that could expose damaging internal communications." Board member Howard Richardson removed his glasses wearily. "Let's be direct, William. Are we discussing a reorganization plan, or are we planning for liquidation?" The question hung heavily in the air. For decades, GAD had been considered too established to fail a permanent fixture in American aviation. Now its collapse seemed not just possible, but imminent. "We're pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously," Stevens replied carefully. "Our immediate focus is a 3-pronged approach: asset sales to generate liquidity, operational restructuring to reduce costs, and an aggressive reimaging campaign to address the perception issues." "Perception issues," board member Janet Morris interrupted sharply. "William, we're facing a crisis of values and accountability, not perception. The videos speak for themselves. Our employees treated a passenger with contempt and then lied about it. That's not a PR problem, it's an integrity problem." Stevens flushed but nodded. "You're right. Which is why we're implementing comprehensive changes to our training policies and accountability systems." He gestured to Victoria Lopez, who presented the hastily developed Respect Initiative GAD's attempt to address the underlying issues exposed by the Hamilton incident. The program included mandatory bias training, revised conflict resolution protocols, electronic verification requirements for all seating disputes, and a new executive position focused on passenger dignity. These measures will be implemented immediately across our entire operation, Victoria concluded. We're also establishing an independent review board to evaluate all passenger removal incidents and policy enforcement patterns. The board members listened with varying degrees of skepticism. The initiatives themselves were sound, but the timing was transparent reactive rather than proactive desperate rather than principled. "This all looks fine on paper," said Richardson, "but will it make any difference to our financial situation? We're bleeding cash daily. These programs require investment at a time when we're contemplating layoffs." CFO Amanda Bennett stepped forward with the financial reality check. "Our runway is now approximately 60 days before we face critical cash flow issues. The asset sales will extend that somewhat, but without significant external investment, we'll need to file for Chapter 11 protection by quarter's end." "And what are the prospects for new investment?" asked Morris. Amanda's expression said everything. "Limited. We've approached 14 potential partners. All have declined, citing concerns about reputational risk and uncertainty about our future viability." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Then perhaps Chapter 11 is the most responsible path," Richardson suggested. "A controlled reorganization might preserve some value and jobs." Stevens shook his head. "We're not there yet. I've initiated discussions with private equity firms specializing in distressed assets. 2 have expressed preliminary interest, though the terms would be challenging, meaning they want to strip us for parts," Morris translated bluntly. "Essentially, yes," Stevens acknowledged. "But it would maintain operations while we rebuild trust and value." The discussion continued, growing increasingly tense as the board debated their dwindling options. Eventually, they authorized Stevens to pursue both the private equity discussions and preliminary Chapter 11 preparations, covering all contingencies. As the meeting adjourned, Stevens remained alone in the boardroom, staring at the portrait of GAD's founder that hung on the wall. How had it come to this? A company with nearly a century of history, thousands of employees, millions of passengers potentially destroyed because of a single incident that exposed the rot beneath the surface. His phone buzzed with a news alert. AirTech announces expansion to 15 new cities, including key GAD hubs. The timing wasn't coincidental. AirTech was systematically targeting GAD's most profitable routes, positioning itself to capture market share as the legacy carrier faltered. Meanwhile, across the country, GAD's desperate measures were being implemented with varying degrees of effectiveness. Frontline employees, already demoralized by the company's crisis and fearful for their jobs, approached the new initiatives with skepticism. "They ignored these issues for years," remarked a veteran flight attendant during a mandatory training session. "Now suddenly it's urgent because it's affecting the stock price." Passenger response was similarly tepid. Despite a major advertising campaign emphasizing GAD's renewed commitment to respect and dignity, bookings continued to decline. Social media remained filled with #boycott-GAD hashtags and personal accounts of discriminatory treatment. The lawsuit proceeded inexorably toward discovery, threatening to expose internal communications that could further damage GAD's reputation and legal position. Initial document requests had sent the legal department into panic mode as they realized the extent of potentially damaging material in company records. As weeks passed, the spiral continued. Cost-cutting measures reduced service quality, further alienating remaining customers. Employee morale plummeted as layoff rumors intensified. Suppliers began demanding advance payment, sensing the company's precarious position. Most telling was the contrast with AirTech, whose expansion continued with remarkable precision and positive energy, While GAD struggled to convince passengers of its commitment to change AirTech, simply demonstrated it through consistent, respectful service across all demographics. In GAD's executive offices, reality was finally setting in. This wasn't a temporary crisis to be managed or a PR challenge to be overcome. This was the beginning of the end for a company that had failed to recognize a fundamental business truth. Dignity wasn't an optional feature or a marketing slogan. It was the foundation of sustainable success. As Stevens prepared for yet another emergency meeting, he couldn't help but reflect on the cruel irony. The $5 billion they had lost from Pinnacle would have saved the airline. Now that same investment was funding their replacement, a company built from the ground up on the principles GAD had dismissed as secondary to real business concerns. The lesson was as expensive as it was clear, but it had come too late to save what was already broken beyond repair. The for sale sign had been in front of Megan Wilson's suburban home for 47 days. 3 price reductions had generated some interest, but no offers. As she stood in her kitchen sorting through yet another stack of unpaid bills, the reality of her situation was inescapable. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband. "Any luck with the interview?" The hope in his simple question made her chest tight with anxiety. "No," she typed back. "They recognized my name. It had been 5 months since Flight 881, 4 months since her termination from GAD, and 3 months of increasingly desperate job searching." Her name and face featured prominently in news coverage and social media posts about the Hamilton incident had made her effectively unemployable in the aviation industry. She had tried everything applying to regional carriers, charter services, even airport retail positions. The result was always the same initial interest followed by sudden rejection once her identity was confirmed. No one wanted to hire that flight attendant from the GAD video. The financial consequences were crushing. Savings depleted. Credit cards maxed out. Mortgage payments missed. The career she had built over 15 years had evaporated overnight. But the personal consequences were even worse. Friends and former colleagues had distanced themselves, fearful of guilt by association. Strangers occasionally recognized her in public, leading to uncomfortable encounters. Her children faced questions and comments at school about their mother's role in the racist airplane incident. Megan had replayed that day countless times in her mind, examining her actions and motivations with painful honesty. Had she really misread the boarding pass? Or had she seen what she expected to see, a black woman who didn't look like she belonged in premium seating? The truth, when she finally admitted it to herself, was devastating. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Unknown number. Probably another collection agency. She answered anyway. "Is this Megan Wilson?" asked a woman's voice. "Yes," Megan replied warily. "My name is Jennifer Lawrence. I'm Dr. Vanessa Hamilton's executive assistant." Megan nearly dropped the phone. I don't understand. Why are you calling me?" "Dr. Hamilton would like to speak with you. Are you available tomorrow at 2 p.m.? The request was so unexpected that Megan could barely process it. "Speak with me." "About what?" "About opportunities at AirTech Innovation," Jennifer replied simply. "The new employee orientation program specifically. Dr. Hamilton believes your experience could be valuable in helping design training scenarios based on real situations." Megan sat down heavily. "Is this some kind of joke?" "Not at all. Dr. Hamilton doesn't believe in punishment without purpose. She thinks your experience both causing harm and experiencing consequences could help create meaningful change in how airline employees are trained." The conversation continued briefly, with Jennifer providing details for the video meeting. After hanging up, Megan sat motionless, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. Was this mercy, opportunity, or something more complex? a chance to transform her worst mistake into something constructive. Across the country, different consequences unfolded for other key players in the incident. Captain James Foster had voluntarily surrendered his pilot credentials, choosing early retirement over the prolonged investigation into his role in the Hamilton removal. The decision brought financial hardship but personal relief. In a lengthy letter to Dr. Hamilton, which she read but never replied to, he had written, "I failed in my most fundamental duty to ensure justice and safety for everyone on my aircraft. The cost of that failure should be mine to bear, not yours." Now he volunteered with a youth aviation program teaching young people of color about careers in flight and about the responsibility that came with authority. Richard Parker's trajectory had been different. Initially defiant, blaming political correctness and social media mobs for the consequences he faced, he had doubled down on defending his actions. The strategy backfired spectacularly when his social media history revealed a pattern of racially charged comments and complaints about minority passengers. Fired and publicly disgraced, he had retreated to his hometown in rural Pennsylvania, taking a job selling home improvement products door to door. The irony wasn't lost on him, spending his days trying to convince strangers to trust him enough to let him into their homes. His moment of reckoning came unexpectedly during a sales call at a suburban home where the television played financial news in the background. There on the screen was Dr. Vanessa Hamilton ringing the opening bell at the NASDAQ as AirTech stock soared. "That's the lady from that airline incident, right?" asked the homeowner, noticing Richard's frozen expression. "Yes," he managed to reply. "I was there. I was the gate agent who started it all." The homeowner's face shifted from interest to discomfort. "I think you should go now." As Richard gathered his samples, his hands shaking the full weight of what he had done, not just to Dr. Hamilton but to himself, his colleagues and 30,000 GAD employees who now faced uncertain futures, finally broke through his defenses. He wasn't just a footnote in someone else's story. He was the catalyst for a chain of events that had destroyed livelihoods, including his own. The transformation wasn't limited to those directly involved. Lydia Rodriguez, the passenger who had tried to defend Dr. Hamilton, found herself unexpectedly elevated to advocate and consultant. After her video of the incident went viral, she had been invited to share her perspective on various news programs. This led to speaking engagements on bystander intervention and eventually a role with AirTech's training program, helping employees understand how to recognize and address discrimination in real time. The lesson I learned that day, she often told new hires, is that silence isn't neutral. When we see injustice and say nothing, we're not staying out of it, we're supporting it through our inaction. For Andrew Donovan, the passenger who had claimed Dr. Hamilton's seat, the consequences were less visible but equally profound. No viral videos had captured his face clearly. No news reports had identified him by name. He had escaped public accountability but not private recognition of his role. When GAD filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months after the incident, Andrew lost his executive platinum status, his accumulated miles, and his sense of entitlement to preferential treatment. As he adjusted to flying on various airlines as a regular passenger, he found himself hyper-aware of how crew members treated customers of different backgrounds, and increasingly uncomfortable with the disparities he now couldn't help but notice. The most meaningful transformations, however, occurred in the countless employees and passengers who had witnessed the incident directly or through media coverage. For them, the Hamilton removal became a reference point, a case study in consequences, a reminder that dignity wasn't an abstract concept, but a practical necessity with real-world implications. Former GAD employees who found positions at other airlines brought heightened awareness of bias and accountability. Passengers became more vigilant about their rights and the rights of those around them. Industry professionals incorporated the lessons into training programs and operational protocols. The ripple effects continued to spread, touching lives and changing perspectives in ways both measurable and immeasurable. One incident had catalyzed a reckoning that extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. For Megan Wilson, sitting in her kitchen with the phone still warm in her hand, the unexpected opportunity from Dr. Hamilton represented something profound, not absolution, but the possibility of purpose arising from pain. The chance to transform her worst professional moment into a teaching tool that might prevent others from making similar mistakes. As she typed a response accepting the meeting invitation, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not for restoration of what was lost, but for creation of something new from the hard lessons she had learned at such tremendous cost. The individual consequences continued to unfold, each person carrying forward their part of a story that had become larger than any of them, a story about power, dignity, accountability, and the true cost of treating people as less than they deserve. 6 months after the partnership announcement, AirTech Innovation had transformed from a promising regional carrier into a major industry player. The statistics told part of the story. Fleet expanded from 30 to 112 aircraft routes, increased from 24 to 87 cities. Employee base grew from 1,200 to 11,500. Market share rose from 2% to 17% nationally. Customer satisfaction scores led the industry at 94%. Stock value increased to 48% since initial public offering. But numbers alone couldn't capture the full extent of the transformation. The real story was in the experiences of passengers, employees, and the industry at large. At Chicago O'Hare Terminal 3, once a GAD stronghold, travelers now queued at AirTech gates drawn by competitive fares and revolutionary service standards. The physical space itself had been redesigned. Gone were the imposing counters and barriers that created artificial distance between staff and passengers. Instead, open podiums and transparent workstations made every interaction visible and accountable. Gate Agent Supervisor Jason Martinez, a former GAD employee of 15 years, observed the operation with pride. The difference isn't just in the procedures, he explained to a group of new hires. It's in the entire philosophy. At GAD, passengers were problems to be processed. Here, they're partners in creating a positive experience. He pointed to the large digital display showing real-time trust metric data for the terminal. See how that number responds immediately to passenger feedback. That's not just information, it's accountability in action. Everyone from me to the CEO knows exactly how we're doing minute by minute. The new hires, a diverse group including several former GAD colleagues, nodded with understanding. They had all completed the immersive dignity protocol training, experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be dismissed, doubted, or discriminated against. The lesson had been powerful and lasting. One more thing, Jason added. In your welcome packets, you'll find information about our monthly reflection sessions. These are open forums where we discuss challenging interactions, near misses, and lessons learned. Total honesty, no repercussions. The first rule of dignity is acknowledging when we fall short. This commitment to continuous improvement extended throughout the organization. AirTech had pioneered what it called dignity audits, regular assessments of how consistently respect and fairness were applied across passenger demographics. The results were published publicly, creating unprecedented transparency in an industry traditionally protective of creating unprecedented transparency in an industry traditionally protective of its internal metrics. Industry publications that had initially viewed AirTech's approach with skepticism now featured regular analyses of its success. Aviation Week's cover story. The Dignity Dividend detailed how AirTech's focus on respectful treatment had translated into tangible business advantages: lower legal expenses from passenger complaints, reduced security and law enforcement interventions, decreased employee turnover and training costs, higher crew productivity and morale, premium pricing power due to superior customer experience. Meanwhile, GAD's decline continued inexorably. Despite implementing similar policies on paper, the legacy carrier couldn't overcome the fundamental trust deficit it faced. Chapter 11. Bankruptcy proceedings had begun with AirTech strategically positioning itself to acquire key routes, gates, and aircraft during the inevitable liquidation. For Rafael Morales, the transformative success brought both validation and challenge. "We've proven that dignity is good business," he told his executive team during their quarterly strategy session. "Now we have to prove it's sustainable at scale." The company faced real pressures as it grew: operational complexities, regulatory scrutiny, and the inevitable challenges of maintaining culture during rapid expansion. Legacy carriers, seeing AirTech's success, scrambled to implement their own versions of the Dignity Protocol, though few committed to the structural changes necessary for authentic transformation. Copycats are emerging, noted AirTech's chief experience officer during the meeting. United just announced their respect guarantee. Delta has dignity assurance. American is implementing trust metrics. Raphael smiled. "Good. That means we're shifting the entire industry. Our goal was never to be the only airline treating people with dignity. It was to make dignity the industry standard." The most powerful testament to AirTech's transformative success came from its workforce, particularly the 4,200 former GAD employees who had found new positions within the growing company. They brought valuable experience and technical skills, but more importantly, they carried the institutional memory of what happened when dignity was treated as optional rather than essential. Megan Wilson had indeed joined AirTech, though not as a flight attendant. Instead, she had become a key contributor to the training program, using her experience to help others recognize and address bias before it escalated to discrimination. Her session on the anatomy of a discriminatory incident had become mandatory for all customer-facing staff, its unflinching honesty creating powerful learning moments. "I'm not proud of my actions that day," she always began, "but I am determined that they serve a purpose beyond my own learning. When I look at Dr. Hamilton now, I don't see the passenger I dismissed. I see the catalyst who forced an entire industry to confront its failures." For Vanessa Hamilton, AirTech's success represented more than a sound investment or personal vindication. It demonstrated a principle she had long believed, that ethical business practices weren't just morally right, but economically superior. The company she had helped transform was proving daily that dignity could be operationalized, measured, and monetized. During a rare media interview with Businessweek, she reflected on the journey from humiliation to transformation. What happened on that plane was never about one seat or one incident. It was about systems that enable bias and discourage accountability. AirTech isn't succeeding because it has newer planes or better routes. It's succeeding because it has built dignity into every aspect of its operation, not as a slogan, but as a structural reality. As AirTech continued its expansion, the contrast with GAD's decline became the subject of business school case studies. Harvard Business Review published an in-depth analysis titled "The Economics of Dignity: How AirTech Revolutionized Aviation." Through respect. The central lesson was clear: in an age of transparency and interconnection, treating people with dignity wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the only sustainable business model. Companies that failed to recognize this fundamental shift would follow GAD's path to obsolescence, while those that embraced it would thrive in the new landscape. The transformation wasn't complete; it never would be. Creating and maintaining a culture of dignity required constant vigilance, honest assessment, and willingness to acknowledge failings. But the direction was clear, the momentum established, and the impact undeniable. An industry long known for treating passengers as self-loading cargo was being reimagined around the radical notion that dignity wasn't a luxury feature, but the essential foundation of every interaction. And it had all begun because one woman refused to surrender her assigned seat without verification. and had the power to transform that moment of disrespect into a revolution. 2 years to the day after the incident that changed everything, JFK Terminal 4 bore little resemblance to its former self. The dingy gray Gaiety carpet was gone, replaced with gleaming polished terrazzo. Flickering fluorescent lights had been exchanged for warm recessed LEDs simulating natural daylight. Hard plastic chairs had given way to sleek modern lounge seating with built-in charging ports for all passengers, not just those in premium classes. Gate 42, the very location where Flight 881 had departed, had been completely reimagined. The imposing counter that once created distance between staff and passengers was replaced by open circular pods where gate agents worked alongside travelers rather than separated from them. Digital displays showed real-time flight information alongside current trust metric scores, creating transparency about both operational performance and customer experience. Most striking was the wall behind the gate area, now featuring a simple inscription: "Dignity is not a perk. It is the price of a ticket." Below these words, a discreet plaque acknowledged the gate's significance. Site of the Hamilton incident, May 15, 2023, where transformation began. The terminal wasn't just remodeled, it was reimagined. The sleek silver and green logo of AirTech Summit, the company had added Summit to its name after fully absorbing GAD's viable assets, appeared throughout the space, a visual reminder of the industry's seismic shift. Passengers moved through the terminal with a noticeable difference in demeanor. Gone was the tense adversarial atmosphere once common in busy airports. In its place was a sense of calm efficiency, of human-centered design that reduced stress points and friction. Staff members engaged with travelers directly without barriers or scripted responses, creating authentic interactions rather than transactional exchanges. The transformation extended beyond aesthetics to core operations. Every interaction was governed by the Dignity Protocol, now refined through 2 years of implementation and continuous improvement. Electronic verification was standard for all passenger documentation. Body cameras activated automatically during potential conflict situations. Real-time feedback systems captured passenger experiences in the moment, not through after-the-fact surveys. Most revolutionary was the Transparency Hub, a physical and digital space where passengers could access comprehensive data about the airline's performance across all metrics, from on-time arrivals to how consistently policies were applied across demographic groups. Nothing was hidden, filtered, or managed. The raw data spoke for itself, creating unprecedented accountability. For the aviation industry, AirTech Summit had become both inspiration and challenge-proof that a fundamentally different approach was possible and profitable, but also a constant reminder of what happened when organizations failed to value dignity as a core operating principle. The terminal transformation reflected a deeper change in how air travel was conceived and delivered. This wasn't just a new airline occupying old spaces. It was a new paradigm, replacing an outdated model that had privileged efficiency over humanity, protocols over people, authority over accountability. And it all began at Gate 42, where one woman's dignity had been dismissed and an entire industry had been forever changed as a result. The sun beat down mercilessly on Richard Parker as he climbed out of his 10-year-old Toyota sedan. The vinyl siding samples in his passenger seat had warped slightly in the heat, much like his life had warped in the 2 years since Flight 881. At 60, Richard had never imagined he'd be trudging door to door selling home improvement products. His career at GAD had promised a comfortable retirement, health benefits, and the respect that came with working for a major airline. Now those prospects were as faded as the Excellence in Customer Service certificate that still hung mockingly on his apartment wall. "Just 5 sales this month," he muttered to himself as he gathered his presentation materials. "Just 5 and I can make rent." The pressure squeezed his chest as he approached the suburban home, rehearsing his pitch for the 100th time. The couple who answered the door, mid-50s, comfortable but not wealthy, invited him in with the polite disinterest of people who had no intention of buying anything. The husband half-watched a financial news program, while the wife listened to Richard's increasingly desperate presentation. And the beauty of the everlast line he was saying, sweat beading on his forehead, is the 30-year warranty. You will never have to paint again. The husband grunted, clearly bored. Richard felt his chances slipping away with each passing moment. "Honey," the wife suddenly said, "that's that woman you like." Richard turned toward the television. There on the screen was Dr. Vanessa Hamilton ringing the opening bell at the NASDAQ. The anchor's voice was animated with admiration. "And there she is, Doctor. Vanessa Hamilton, as AirTech Summit stock, surges another 20 points, making it the most valuable airline in America. It's hard to believe that just 2 years ago she built this empire from the ashes of her competitor." Richard froze. His sales pamphlet slipped from nerveless fingers. That face. He saw it in his nightmares, still the calm, collected woman who had looked at him as he sneered about her not looking like a premium passenger. The woman whose dignity he had casually dismissed with a gesture and a comment. The woman who had in turn reshaped an entire industry because of that moment. "I love this story," the wife said to her husband. "This is the lady who was dragged off a GAD flight, right? And then the CEO fired her attackers and bankrupted the whole airline." "Not quite," the husband replied, turning up the volume. "She was the one who bankrupted them. She was their financing. They messed with their own bank." "God, what a bunch of morons." He chuckled. "Good for her, though. That's a real boss right there." Richard felt the air leave his lungs. He had never known the full story. He had believed he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, an innocent bystander caught in corporate politics. He never realized he had been the catalyst, the first domino in a chain reaction that had collapsed an entire company. The weight of consequence pressed down on him with new intensity. His thoughtless words hadn't just impacted one passenger's day. They had set in motion events that cost 30,000 people their jobs, including his own. His casual bias had revealed deeper institutional failures that couldn't survive exposure. "Sir." The husband had noticed Richard's pale, sweaty face. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I have to go," Richard stammered. He gathered his samples with trembling hands and fled the house. Sitting in his old Toyota, the vinyl siding samples melting slightly in the passenger seat, he confronted the truth he'd been avoiding for 2 years. He wasn't the victim of corporate politics or social media outrage. He was a footnote in the story of a titan, a tiny, pathetic man who had demanded respect he hadn't earned, and in the process lost everything that mattered. On the radio, a news update mentioned AirTech Summit's continued expansion. Richard switched it off with a shaking hand. He couldn't escape the story, couldn't outrun the consequences, couldn't hide from the truth that was now painfully clear. His actions had mattered far more than he ever imagined possible. As he pulled away from the curb, Richard made a decision. He would apply to the Dignity Protocol training program that AirTech offered to former GAD employees. He had no illusion that they would hire him. His face was too recognizable, his role too central to the original incident. But perhaps by acknowledging his part in the story, he could begin to build something worthwhile from the ruins of his former life. It wouldn't restore what he had lost, but it might just possibly give meaning to the hard lessons he had learned at such tremendous cost. Station manager Lucas Ramirez surveyed Gate 42 with quiet pride. At 34, he'd risen from baggage handler to overseeing AirTech Summit's flagship terminal in just 2 years, a trajectory that would have been impossible in the rigid hierarchy of the former GAD. The morning rush was in full swing, yet the atmosphere remained calm and organized. Staff moved with purpose but without panic. Passengers waited with patience born of trust rather than resignation. The digital displays showed on-time departures, transparent seat availability, and trust metric scores consistently in the high 90s. Lucas remembered this same gate under GAD management. The tension, the arbitrary enforcement of policies, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways certain passengers were treated differently than others. He remembered because he'd been there loading bags below while discord unfolded above. Mr. Ramirez. A new hire approached, tablet in hand. I have a potential dignity risk situation. 2 passengers have the same seat assignment for Flight 127. Lucas nodded. Verification protocol. Already implemented, the young woman replied. Electronic scan confirms both boarding passes show 12A due to a system error during a schedule change. I've prepared 3 options for resolution. Well done. Lucas reviewed the options on the tablet. Let's offer both passengers their choice of first-class upgrade or $300 flight credit as compensation for our error, and make sure it's entered in the system transparency log. The employee nodded and returned to her station. Lucas watched as she handled the situation with the calm confidence that came from clear protocols and genuine empowerment. Both passengers left satisfied, the potential conflict diffused before it began. This was the new gate experience, problems acknowledged rather than denied solutions, focused on dignity rather than convenience, accountability built into every interaction. It hadn't happened overnight. It had required rethinking every aspect of the passenger journey from booking to baggage claim. Lucas had been part of that transformation from the beginning. After losing his job when GAD entered bankruptcy, he'd been among the first wave of former employees hired by the expanding AirTech. He brought valuable operational knowledge, but had to unlearn entrenched habits and assumptions about how an airline should function. The training had been unlike anything he'd experienced at GAD. Instead of focusing on procedures and regulations, it began with empathy, understanding what it felt like to be dismissed, devalued, or discriminated against. Every employee, regardless of role or rank, went through the same immersive experience of being treated as less than based on arbitrary characteristics. That training changed me. Lucas often told new hires during orientation, not just professionally but personally. It made me see how many times I'd been on the wrong side of dignity, not out of malice but out of indifference. The physical transformation of Terminal 4 reflected this philosophical shift. Gone were the barriers that created artificial distance between staff and passengers. Gone were the hidden decision-making processes that left travelers feeling powerless and frustrated. Gone was the culture of unquestioned authority that enabled bias to flourish unchecked. In their place was a system built on radical transparency and mutual respect. Every interaction was governed by clear protocols visible to all parties. Every decision was documented and reviewable. Every metric was displayed in real time, creating accountability that couldn't be avoided or minimized. The dignity protocol that had once seemed idealistic had proven remarkably practical. Electronic verification eliminated subjective judgments about who looked like they belonged in certain seats. Body cameras provided context for any conflicts that arose. The trust metric created immediate feedback loops that identified potential issues before they escalated. Most importantly, the entire system was designed to evolve rather than rigidify. Regular dignity audits assessed how consistently respect and fairness were applied across all passenger demographics. Employee forums encouraged honest discussions about challenges and failures. Passenger feedback was integrated directly into operational improvements. For Lucas, the transformation was deeply personal. He had been working as a baggage handler the day Dr. Hamilton was removed from Flight 881. He had retrieved her confiscated luggage, seen her name on the tags, and realized with growing horror who had been mistreated. He'd tried to report the incident to management only to be told to stay in your lane. When GAD collapsed, he'd kept the baggage tag as a reminder of what happened when power went unchecked. Now, 2 years later, he oversaw the very gate where it all began. Every decision he made, every employee he trained, every system he implemented was informed by the lessons of that day. Not as abstract principles, but as lived experience of how quickly dignity could be stripped away, and how completely an organization could unravel when that happened repeatedly. As Lucas continued his morning rounds, he paused to assist an elderly passenger struggling with the check-in kiosk. The interaction was brief, but genuine human connection rather than processed efficiency. This, too, was part of the new gate experience. Moments of authentic engagement replacing transactional exchanges. "Thank you, young man," the woman said as he completed her check-in. "You know, I used to dread flying. Now I actually look forward to it." Lucas smiled. "That's the highest compliment we could receive." As he returned to his station, Lucas reflected on the journey from baggage handler to station manager, from a system built on authority to one founded on accountability. The transformation wasn't just professional, but personal, a daily recommitment to seeing people as people, not problems or procedures. Gate 42 had once been the site of humiliation and injustice. Now it stood as a testament to what was possible when dignity became not just a value, but an operational reality. The new gate experience wasn't perfect. Nothing involving human interaction ever could be, but it was fundamentally different in ways that mattered deeply to everyone involved. And it had all begun because one woman refused to be dismissed, one company refused to compromise, and an entire industry was forced to confront its failures head-on. Dr. Vanessa Hamilton stood by the window of Terminal 4 watching AirTech Summit's A321neo being serviced on the tarmac. She was dressed as always in her travel uniform, a simple black hoodie, black joggers, and comfortable sneakers. The absence of designer labels and executive accessories remained her preference, a quiet reminder that dignity wasn't determined by appearance. 2 years had passed since she'd been forcibly removed from Flight 881. 2 years of transformation, rebuilding, and reimagining what air travel could be. The $5 billion that had once been earmarked to save GAD had instead created something entirely new, an airline built from the ground up on respect, accountability, and transparency. She was working on her laptop, finalizing details for a new $10 billion green energy fund, when she noticed a young man in an impeccably tailored AirTech Summit manager suit approaching. His movements were hesitant, his face a mixture of terror and awe. "Dr. Hamilton," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "Ma'am." Vanessa looked up, her expression neutral but polite. "My name is Lucas Ramirez," he said. "I'm the station manager for Terminal 4. "A pleasure to meet you, Lucas," Vanessa replied, preparing for the usual operational questions that accompanied her infrequent visits to AirTech facilities. "No, I had to say thank you," he blurted out. Vanessa paused, setting her laptop aside. "Thank you for what?" 2 years ago, I was here at this gate. I worked for GAD. I was a baggage handler. I was on duty that night." He swallowed hard. "I was one of the 30,000 people who got laid off when GAD went under." Vanessa's face softened. The rage she had felt that night was long gone, replaced by the satisfaction of problems solved. Systems improved, principles vindicated. But this was the human cost and human benefit that sometimes got lost in the larger narrative. "Lucas, that must have been a terrible time for you." "It was," he nodded. "But that's not why I'm here." He took a deep breath. "When AirTech started hiring, I applied. I just needed a job." But the training, it was different. He described his first day of orientation, how a man whom Vanessa had personally hired from the hospitality industry, not aviation, had spent 4 hours talking about the GAD incident. He called it the fall, and said their one and only mission, their sacred duty, was to ensure that the principle of that incident never happened here. He said your motto was, "Dignity is not a perk, it is the price of a ticket." Vanessa hadn't known this specific detail. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. I worked my way up. Lucas continued, his voice gaining confidence. They really promote from within. They listen. My ideas for a better baggage tracking system, they implemented it. And last month they made me station manager of this terminal, the very place where it all went wrong. He was tearing up now and quickly wiped his eye. I'm sorry. It's just, you didn't just build a new airline, Dr. Hamilton. You built a better one. You saved me. You saved a lot of us. I wanted to thank you for building it. Vanessa was genuinely moved. This was the true victory. Not the money, not the bankruptcies, not the revenge. It was this taking something broken, rotten, and prejudiced, and building something strong, respectful, and good in its place. Creating opportunities for people like Lucas, who brought talent and dedication to an organization that now recognized and rewarded those qualities regardless of background or appearance. She stood, and to Lucas's great shock, extended her hand. Lucas, she said, her voice warm, thank you for telling me that. You're the one building it, you and everyone else here. I was just the first investor. Lucas shook her hand, beaming with pride and validation. An announcement came over the PA system. We are now ready to begin pre-boarding for Flight 1 non-stop to Los Angeles at Gate 42. Oh, Lucas said, snapping back to professional mode. Dr. Hamilton, I have you right here. He checked his tablet. You're in 1A, our flagship suite. Please let me escort you on board right now. You don't have to wait. Vanessa looked down at her boarding pass on her phone. She had, as always, booked 12A, a window seat in premium economy. She looked closer. The pass had been updated seat 1A. Status Chairman's Circle. The system, recognizing her name, had automatically upgraded her to the best seat on the plane. She hadn't even noticed. She looked at the line forming. She looked at Lucas's eager face. Then she zipped up her backpack and slung it over one shoulder. Thank you, Lucas. That's very kind, she said. But I think I'll just board with my group. I'm Zone 3, I believe. Lucas looked aghast. But Dr. Hamilton, you own the airline. Vanessa smiled a real bright smile. Today I'm just a passenger in 12A, or 1A. It doesn't really matter, does it? On this airline, she said, nodding at him, every seat is a good one. She stepped into the Zone 3 line right behind a young family struggling with a stroller. She blended in. She was just another passenger going home. But as she walked down the jet bridge, Lucas and his entire gate crew watched her go. They didn't just see a passenger. They saw the ghost and the phoenix of Gate 42. The woman who had been dragged off a plane only to return as the woman who had built a better one. She didn't need to cut the line. She already owned the destination. As Flight 1 prepared for departure, Vanessa settled into her seat, 1A, as Lucas had insisted despite her willingness to remain in economy. The cabin of the A321neo reflected AirTech Summit's philosophy in every detail: spacious seating for all passengers, not just those in premium classes. Transparent dividers rather than curtains between sections. Technology that enhanced human connection rather than replacing it. A young flight attendant approached her movements precise but natural, her smile genuine rather than practiced. Dr. Hamilton, she said, welcome aboard. Vanessa thanked her, expecting the usual pre-departure routine. Instead, the young woman hesitated, then spoke in a quieter voice. My mother was a GAD flight attendant for 20 years, she said. She was fired for reporting discrimination against passengers. She told me to give you this if I ever saw you. She handed Vanessa a small envelope, then continued her duties with professional efficiency. Vanessa opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a simple handwritten note. Thank you for proving her right. The words resonated deeply. Vanessa carefully folded the note and placed it in her journal, the same journal where 2 years earlier she had written her promise. This will never happen to anyone else. As the aircraft prepared for departure, Vanessa reflected on the journey from that moment of humiliation to this one of transformation. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been legal challenges, media scrutiny, industry resistance, and the complex task of building something new while dismantling something broken. But the results spoke for themselves. AirTech Summit hadn't just survived, it had thrived, creating a new standard that other airlines were now scrambling to meet. More importantly, it had demonstrated that treating people with dignity wasn't just morally right, but financially sound. The business case for respect had been proven in quarterly reports, stock valuations, and market share. Yet the most significant changes weren't visible in financial statements or industry analyses. They were in the daily experiences of passengers who no longer dreaded flying. They were in the professional lives of employees who felt valued and empowered rather than constrained and coerced. They were in the subtle but profound shift from a culture of authority to one of accountability. The transformation extended beyond a single airline to the industry at large. Regulatory agencies had implemented new standards for passenger treatment. Training programs had been redesigned to emphasize empathy alongside technical skills. Technology had been repurposed to create transparency rather than obscuring accountability. As Flight 1 lifted smoothly from the runway, Vanessa noticed something unusual on her seatback screen. Instead of the typical safety video, a simple message appeared. Welcome aboard. At AirTech Summit, we believe everyone deserves dignity, respect, and a seat exactly where they belong. If you ever feel differently, the CEO's direct line is on the back of your safety card. She answers personally. Below it was Rafael Morales' signature, a reminder that while Vanessa had provided the catalyst and capital for transformation, the daily leadership came from those who shared her vision and values. Looking around the cabin, Vanessa saw passengers from all backgrounds dressed in everything from business suits to travel-worn hoodies. Each was treated with the same attentive respect by the crew. Each had access to the same comfort information and accountability mechanisms. Each was valued not for their status or appearance but for their humanity. This was the true legacy of Flight 881. Not the humiliation of one passenger or the collapse of one airline, but the creation of a new standard for how people deserve to be treated. A standard that recognized dignity not as an aspiration, but as an operational imperative. Some companies learned through training, others learned through consultants. But the most powerful lesson in business history had come from a woman in a hoodie who refused to move from her assigned seat and instead moved an entire industry. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Vanessa opened her laptop to continue work on her next project. The past was acknowledged, its lessons integrated, but her focus, as always, remained on building what came next. The transformation continued, and it was just beginning. The AirTech Summit model didn't remain unique for long. Within 3 years, the principles of the Dignity Protocol had become standard across the aviation industry, integrated into regulatory requirements and customer expectations alike. Airlines that had initially dismissed the approach as idealistic or unnecessary found themselves losing market share to competitors who embraced it. The business case became irrefutable, as data consistently showed higher profits, lower liability costs, and greater customer loyalty for carriers that prioritized dignity as a core operating principle. Harvard Business School made the Hamilton effect a required case study analyzing how one incident of discrimination had triggered industry-wide transformation. The lesson extended beyond aviation to hospitality, retail healthcare, and financial services, any sector where human interaction determined customer experience. The most lasting legacy, however, was in the invisible but fundamental shift in power dynamics between service providers and customers. What had once been a one-way relationship with companies dictating terms and customers accepting what was offered had become a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and transparent accountability. For the millions of passengers who had experienced discrimination, dismissal, or disrespect in the past, this shift represented more than corporate policy. It was personal vindication. Their experiences hadn't been imagined or exaggerated. Their dignity did matter. And now, finally, the systems they navigated recognized that essential truth. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination today? Would you speak up, record what you saw, stand with those being mistreated, or would you remain silent, telling yourself it wasn't your problem or your place to intervene? The true power of Dr. Vanessa Hamilton's story isn't that she had the financial leverage to transform an industry. It's that she refused to accept disrespect as inevitable and in doing so created space for all of us to demand better. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more accounts of dignity prevailing over dismissal, accountability triumphing over avoidance. Hit that like button to help spread this message further. Because the revolution that began at Gate 42 continues with each of us in everyday moments when we choose respect over convenience, truth over comfort, dignity over discrimination. The next chapter is yours to write. Make it count. And don't forget to join our community of changemakers by subscribing now and turning on notifications so you never miss another powerful story of transformation.